Hey there, tonight we're diving into the unexpected chaos of Pearl Harbor through a soldier's eyes, where you'll discover that not every hero wore a cape. Some just tried to find their pants amidst the surprise attack. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now get comfortable, perhaps dim the lights, or find that perfect pillow position, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun peers over the horizon, casting its golden gaze on the serene waters of Pearl Harbor, and you stir awake in your barracks, blissfully unaware that today's not going to be your usual Sunday. It's December 7, 1941, and while you're thinking about sleeping in or maybe catching a matinee in Honolulu, history's got other plans. But for now, you're just a soldier stationed at one of the most strategically significant naval bases in the world. Let's talk about Pearl Harbor itself for a second. This place is no tropical paradise getaway. It's a military hub, a hive of activity, with a bustling harbor full of battleships and aircraft carriers. Think of it as the U.S. Navy's VIP section in the Pacific. The base sprawls over 12,000 acres, packed with over 140 vessels, including 8 battleships, those floating fortresses that symbolize American might. But don't let the palm trees and crystal-clear waters fool you. This isn't a postcard. It's a fortress. Your daily grind here is all about routine, drills, maintenance, and the occasional bout of wading around. The Navy's not exactly a 9-to-5 gig, but Sundays are supposed to be easy. Maybe you'd hit the mess hall for powdered eggs and coffee that could double as paint remover. Or perhaps you'd be planning a swim or a game of baseball with your buddies. But that's just the surface stuff. Underneath the palm-fronded calm, the geopolitical tension is thicker than a Navy bean soup. Japan's been doing its best impression of a land-hungry octopus, grabbing territory across Asia like it's going out of style. The U.S., not thrilled about this expansion, slapped an embargo on oil exports to Japan. And when you cut off a country's oil supply, it's kinda like taking away its car keys. Things tend to get tense. The Japanese Empire, led by the power-hungry Emperor Showa, is feeling the pinch. Their war machine guzzles oil like a dehydrated camel at an oasis. With oil reserves dwindling and diplomacy going nowhere, Japan's eyes turn towards a quick and decisive action. You've probably heard of the Axis powers, right? Japan, Germany, and Italy, the not-so-friendly trio in this global drama. While Hitler's busy in Europe, Japan's got its sights set on dominating the Pacific. Back in your barracks, though, this isn't something that crosses your mind while you lace up your boots. You're just another cog in Uncle Sam's big, complex machine. But let's zoom out for a moment. The U.S. military presence here is a deterrent, a big, glaring do-not-touch sign in the middle of the Pacific. It's supposed to keep the Japanese in check. At least, that's the theory. Now, if you're thinking Pearl Harbor is just about pineapples and sunsets, you're missing the point. This place is a linchpin in global strategy. Whoever controls the Pacific controls the shipping lanes, and whoever controls the shipping lanes controls the flow of goods and oil. And right about now, oil is the lifeblood of modern warfare. As you go about your morning routine, the tension between the U.S. and Japan isn't exactly bedtime reading material for you. But it's in the air. You might have caught snippets of it in the newspapers or heard officers discussing the possibility of conflict. But it's all talk, right? After all, America is a continental fortress, flanked by oceans. Who would dare attack? Spoiler alert, quite a few people. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The Japanese have been planning their strike on Pearl Harbor with the precision of a Swiss watch. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind behind the operation, knows the stakes. He's not some mustache-twirling villain. He's a seasoned tactician who studied in the U.S. and understands the American psyche. He knows this attack needs to be devastating enough to knock the U.S. out of the Pacific before they can even reach for their baseball bats. But for you and your fellow servicemen, the day is still just another Sunday in paradise. You're not thinking about geopolitical chess moves or oil embargoes. You're thinking about breakfast, about the letters from home, about that girl you met at the USO dance. Little do you know, the stage is set for a day that will live in infamy. The irony is, the U.S. Navy was on alert for sabotage, not a full-blown attack. You're more likely to be assigned to guard duty with orders to watch out for espionage than to man battle stations. It's a classic case of fighting the last war. But here's the twist. The Japanese are about to pull off one of the most audacious military maneuvers in history, and no one sees it coming. So there you are, possibly still half asleep, pondering whether to grab another cup of that rocket fuel they call coffee. The sun's climbing higher, and the day's about to take a turn that no amount of morning briefing could ever prepare you for. Welcome to the eye of the storm, my friend. Buckle up, because this ride's just getting started. Just as you're contemplating whether that second cup of coffee is worth the risk of a caffeine-induced heart attack, the morning tranquility is shattered. The sky, once a canvas of calm blues, now buzzes with an ominous symphony, the deafening roar of aircraft engines. Spoiler alert, these aren't your friendly neighborhood planes. Nope, this is the herald of chaos, an unscheduled airshow courtesy of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty of this surprise attack. Picture over 350 Japanese planes swooping down on Pearl Harbor, like an airborne swarm straight out of an action flick. Except this is painfully real. The operation, codenamed Operation AI, was a meticulously crafted plan that had been in the works for months. The Japanese had even gone so far as to construct a replica of Pearl Harbor in their homeland to practice their moves. Talk about commitment to a role. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brain behind this audacious assault, knew that the element of surprise was his ace in the hole. Why? Because the U.S. Navy was about as prepared for an air raid as a fish is for a bicycle race. The Americans were expecting sabotage from within, not a full-scale bombardment from above. It was like locking the front door while leaving the back wide open and wondering why there's a draft. Here's how it went down. The first wave of fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes struck just before 8:00 a.m., catching the Pacific Fleet with its proverbial pants down. The initial targets, battleships and airfields, the heavy hitters of American naval power. By the time the second wave rolled in an hour later, the damage was already catastrophic. The USS Arizona, the pride of the fleet, took a bomb to the magazine, igniting over 1 million pounds of explosives and sealing the fate of 177 sailors. That's more than half of the total American casualties that day. Now, let's talk numbers. The Japanese planes weren't just buzzing around aimlessly. They had a hit list, and they checked it twice. In total, 8 battleships were hit, with 4 being sunk outright. 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and nearly 200 aircraft were also knocked out of commission. The attack left the U.S. Navy reeling, with damage estimates soaring into the hundreds of millions of dollars. A staggering figure in 1941, when a loaf of bread cost about 8 cents. As for the Japanese, they lost just 29 planes. That's right, a mere 29. Talk about a lopsided affair. But before you start thinking this was some kind of strategic genius move, let's debunk a few myths. Pearl Harbor wasn't a flawless masterstroke. Sure, it was a tactical surprise, but it was meant to cripple the U.S. Pacific Fleet long enough for Japan to secure its imperial conquests. The long-term strategic ramifications, not so much in Japan's favor. They didn't touch the American aircraft carriers, which were fortuitously out at sea during the attack. These carriers would come back to haunt them in future battles, like the ghosts of Christmas past. And let's not get swept up in Hollywood's love for tales of lone heroes single-handedly saving the day by body-slamming enemy planes. The reality was far messier. Yes, there were acts of incredible bravery, but they were among a backdrop of chaos and confusion. The U.S. forces were caught off guard, scrambling to respond. Anti-aircraft guns, not fully manned, were slow to retaliate, and communication breakdowns were rampant. It's less Top Gun and more Keystone Cops. What about the supposed strategic genius of the Japanese? On one hand, they executed a surprise attack that achieved immediate tactical success. On the other, they underestimated the industrial and military might of the United States. In an ironic twist, the attack they hoped would secure their empire instead galvanized American resolve. Turning public opinion from isolationism to all-out war was like poking a sleeping giant and being surprised when it wakes up cranky and ready to throw down. Amid the smoke and fire, there are tales of extraordinary human spirit. Sailors worked frantically to rescue trapped comrades, and medics performed triage in makeshift infirmaries. These stories deserve recognition, not as romanticized legends, but but as reminders of resilience in the face of disaster. By the end of the day, as the fires continued to smolder, the U.S. Pacific Fleet lay crippled, and the nation was stunned. You, like many others, might have been left standing in disbelief, trying to process the whirlwind of destruction that had just unfolded. The world had shifted on its axis, and there was no turning back. But hold onto your helmets, because this story's far from over. While today was a stark wake-up call, it also marked the beginning of a new chapter in the global conflict. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a tactical victory for Japan, but its strategic implications would soon unfold in unexpected ways. As the dust settled, the stage was set for a new kind of warfare, one that would redefine the 20th century and beyond. So, as you stand there amidst the wreckage, remember this. History doesn't just happen in books or movies. It's real, messy, and often absurd. And sometimes sneaks up on you when you least expect it, like a surprise air raid on a sleepy Sunday morning. As the sun dips lower and the Hawaiian sky shifts from blue to a bruised purple, you find yourself amid a scene that's equal parts chaos and community. The attack may have ended, but the real work has just begun. Welcome to the aftermath, where the heroism is unscripted and the stakes are as high as they get. Picture this. Sailors and soldiers, still stunned and smoke-stained, now morph into first responders. The goal, to turn the tide of destruction into a semblance of order, and fast. You're right there with them, navigating a landscape that looks like it was ripped from a disaster movie script. But here's the twist. There's no director yelling, "cut," when things get rough. This is real life, and it's unflinchingly gritty. First up in this unscheduled chaos is the scramble for medical aid. The base hospital, which usually deals with injuries no more severe than a sprained ankle from a poorly executed dive at the beach, is now the epicenter of triage. Picture medics working with a frenetic energy that would make an ER episode look like a stroll in the park. They're improvising with whatever they can find, sheets as bandages, tables as makeshift operating surfaces. It's battlefield medicine at its rawest. And it's not just the hospital staff. Everyone with a pulse and a pair of hands is drafted into service. A young sailor, maybe someone who until yesterday was more at ease with a wrench than a bandage, finds himself thrust into the role of a medic. He's not alone. Throughout the base, tales of impromptu ingenuity unfold. You've got cooks turned stretcher bearers and clerks doing CPR. It's all hands on deck, and the deck's a mess. While this human tapestry unravels, let's not forget the numbers behind the narrative. The attack left 403 Americans dead, and another 178 wounded. But behind these statistics are faces and names, ordinary folks caught in extraordinary circumstances. Take Donald Stratton, for instance, a sailor on the USS Arizona. He survives the inferno by crawling hand over hand along a rope, suffering severe burns in the process. Or Doris Miller, an African-American mess attendant who, despite having no formal gunnery training, mans a machine gun and fires back at the attacking planes. Heroes, yes, but they're also reminders that history is more than just cold numbers. Now, about those communication breakdowns. If you think your group chat gets messy, imagine the military communication lines during the attack. It was like a game of telephone gone horribly wrong, but with much higher stakes. Confusion reigned supreme as messages were delayed, misinterpreted, or outright lost. The result? A chain of command that's more tangled than a pair of headphones in your pocket. Orders overlap, contradict, or fail to reach the right ears entirely. It's a mess that would be laughable if it weren't so tragic. But let's zoom out for a second. These communication failures weren't just about crossed wires and missed memos. They highlight a broader issue, the U.S. military's unpreparedness for an aerial assault on its Pacific stronghold. It's a wake-up call delivered with a sledgehammer, and the reverberations will reshape military strategy for years to come. And then there's the daunting task of recovery. With ships still smoldering in the harbor, the priority is clear. Salvage what can be saved. The USS Nevada, despite being grounded during the attack, becomes a symbol of resilience as she's refloated and repaired. It's a Herculean effort involving cranes, pumps, and sheer willpower. The effort isn't just about saving steel and hardware. It's about restoring morale, proving that while the fleet may be battered, it's far from broken. Economically, the attack is a sucker punch. The cost of the damage soars into the hundreds of millions, a staggering figure in 1941, when even a penny candy was a legitimate thing. But beyond the immediate financial hit, there's a bigger picture to consider. The attack catalyzes a massive ramp-up in U.S. industrial production, transforming America into the arsenal of democracy. Factories across the nation shift, gears from civilian goods to military hardware, a pivot that will have ripple effects across the globe. Now, let's debunk a few myths while we're at it. The image of Pearl Harbor as a flawless Japanese victory tends to overshadow its strategic missteps. Sure, the attack was a tactical surprise and initially paralyzed the Pacific Fleet, but it missed key targets, namely the aircraft carriers and crucial fuel storage facilities. These oversights would come back to haunt Japan as the carriers that escaped destruction became pivotal in future Pacific battles. And of course, there's the myth of the lone hero. While Hollywood loves to shine the spotlight on the solitary figure saving the day, the reality is that recovery and response were collective efforts, powered by countless unsung heroes. It's not about a single act of valor, but a series of actions by individuals stepping up in a crisis, often without recognition or glory. As the dust begins to settle, a sobering realization sets in. The attack on Pearl Harbor wasn't just a military event, it was a seismic shift in American consciousness. Isolationism, once a dominant sentiment, crumbles in the wake of the attack. The United States, once hesitant to entangle itself in global conflicts, now finds itself thrust into the heart of World War II, with public opinion rallying for retribution and resolve. And so, as you stand in the midst of this whirlwind of response and recovery, you're part of a story that's still unfolding. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a day that would indeed live in infamy, but not just for its devastation. It set the stage for a global transformation, one that would redefine nations and reshape the future. But hang tight, because this saga's far from over. The world's a different place now, and as the sun sets on December 7th, 1941, new challenges and battles loom on the horizon. History's writing itself in real time, and you're smack dab in the middle of it. Stay tuned, because the story's just getting started. As the smoke clears and the sun rises on December 8, 1941, the world's a different place, my friend. In Washington, D.C., President Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR if you're on a first-name basis, is gearing up to address Congress, and through them, the entire nation. Now, Roosevelt's no stranger to the podium, but today's speech is destined to become one for the history books, or at least the highlight reel. Let's set the stage. With a cigarette holder clenched between his teeth like a gangster from a noir film, Roosevelt delivers what would famously be known as the Day of Infamy speech. But here's the thing, despite its cinematic name, the speech is more than just a dramatic monologue. It's a rallying cry. Roosevelt's words are carefully crafted to channel the collective shock and anger of a nation blindsided. He declares, yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. No ambiguity there. FDR's laying it out with the precision of a courtroom lawyer. Now, why does this matter? Well, think of it as the moment the U.S. flips the switch from isolationist to interventionist faster than you can say blitzkrieg. The speech isn't just about riling up Congress for a declaration of war, which, spoiler alert, they grant almost unanimously, save for one dissenting vote. It's about uniting a fractured public opinion under a single banner. Before Pearl Harbor, a good chunk of Americans were content to watch World War II from the sidelines, like an intense but distant reality show. Roosevelt's speech is the wake-up call that the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans aren't the moats they once thought. Back on the political stage, the machinery of government kicks into high gear. Within 24 hours of Roosevelt's speech, Congress declares war on Japan. The vote, 388 to 1 in the House, and a unanimous decision in the Senate. That one dissenting vote belongs to Representative Jeanette Rankin of Montana, a staunch pacifist who also voted against entering World War I. Rankin's choice is a testament to her principles, sure, but let's face it, she couldn't have been more alone if she'd shown up to a toga party in a tuxedo. Her dissent underscores the overwhelming shift in public mood. Meanwhile, over in the Pacific, you're still wrestling with the aftermath of the attack. The transition from peacetime soldier to wartime warrior is as abrupt as it gets. One minute you're worried about whether the mess hall's serving up mystery meat again. The next, you're in the thick of mobilizing for war. The disconnect between the political theater in D.C. and the gritty reality on the ground is palpable. While speeches are being made and declarations signed, you're just trying to make sense of the chaos. And let's talk logistics for a minute. War isn't just about soldiers and sailors. It's about supply lines, production, and cold, hard cash. The U.S. economy is about to shift into overdrive, cranking out tanks, planes, and ships like they're going out of style. In 1942 alone, American factories will produce nearly 48,000 aircraft. By the war's end, they'll churn out upwards of 300,000. That's like turning your grandma's sewing machine into a Formula One car overnight. But here's where it gets interesting. This economic boom isn't just about numbers. It's a social revolution. Women, who until now were largely confined to roles like Rosie the Riveter, step into the workforce in unprecedented numbers. They're building planes, wielding welding torches, and proving that their place is wherever they darn well please. Thank you very much. It's a quiet yet seismic shift that will help redefine gender roles for generations. Let's not gloss over the racial dynamics either. While the war effort opens up new opportunities for African Americans and other minorities, it's not all rosy. Segregation and discrimination are still rampant, both in the military and on the home front. Yet the need for manpower forces some cracks in the wall. The workforce is as diverse as ever, but equality, that's still a work in progress. Meanwhile, in the Pacific, the military's scrambling to regroup. The brass is piecing together a plan of action faster than a barista slinging lattes in a morning rush. You're part of a massive mobilization effort, with troops being deployed to strategic locations across the Pacific. The Battle of Midway, coming up in June 1942, will prove to be a critical turning point. But for now, it's all about readiness and resilience. Back home, the attack on Pearl Harbor unites Americans in a way that few events could. It's a galvanizing moment, one that cuts across political, social, and economic lines. The nation rallies around a shared cause, with war barns selling like hotcakes and citizens volunteering in droves. The spirit of unity is palpable, even as families brace for the harsh realities of war. Yet this newfound unity doesn't erase the underlying tensions. The internment of Japanese Americans, a dark chapter in U.S. history, is a stark reminder of fear-based policy. Over 120,000 people of Japanese descent, many of them U.S. citizens, are forcibly relocated to internment camps. It's a decision driven by paranoia, prejudice, and politics, and it leaves a stain that's hard to scrub away. As you stand amid the churn of events, the disconnect between the political declarations and the gritty reality of soldier life is unmistakable. The grand speeches and sweeping policies are all well and good, but on the ground, it's about survival, camaraderie, and the slow grind of rebuilding. The world's in flux, and you're smack in the middle of it, feeling the weight of history on your shoulders and the uncertainty of what's to come. But hang on tight, because this story's still unfolding. The gears of history are turning, and the next chapters promise to be as complex and compelling as the ones that came before. So stay tuned, because in this global drama, the plot twists are just getting started. As the dust settles and the gears of America's war machine start grinding into action, you're standing at the precipice of a seismic shift. Pearl Harbor isn't just yesterday's news. It's the catalyst for the United States' full-throttle entry into World War II. Let's take a moment to appreciate the irony. The Japanese aimed to cripple American resolve, but instead, they handed Uncle Sam a Red Bull and said, "Go nuts." Now, fasten your seatbelt as we dive into the strategic overhaul that follows. The U.S. military, once caught napping in paradise, is now wide awake and ready to rumble. The focus shifts towards a two-pronged strategy, the European theater and the Pacific theater. The Pacific becomes a chessboard, with island-hopping operations that would make a grandmaster sweat. The goal, to leapfrog across the Pacific, capturing strategic islands, and getting within striking distance of Japan. The Battle of Midway in June 1942 is a turning point, a David and Goliath saga, where U.S. forces sink 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, turning the tide of the war in the Pacific faster than you can say checkmate. Meanwhile, back in the homeland, the economic mobilization is like nothing the world has seen. The U.S. cranks up its industrial production to levels that would make even Henry Ford blush. By war's end, America's factories churn out 300 000 aircraft, 100 000 tanks, and enough ammunition to make any enemy think twice. This industrial boom doesn't just fuel the war effort, it reshapes the nation's economy, laying the groundwork for post-war prosperity. But it's not all nuts and bolts. There's a cultural revolution simmering on the home front. Women, who once faced barriers thicker than a battleship's hull, are now stepping into roles that redefine the American workforce. Rosie the Riveter isn't just a poster girl. She's a symbol of resilience and change. Women flood into factories, shipyards, and offices, proving that their place isn't just in the kitchen or on the sidelines, but right in the thick of it. And when the war ends, they don't just vanish into the background. They've set the stage for future battles for gender equality. Of course, it's not all rainbows and rivets. The racial dynamics of the time are a mixed bag of progress and prejudice. While the need for manpower opens doors for African Americans and other minorities, the U.S. is still grappling with segregation and discrimination. The Tuskegee Airmen, the first African American military aviators, break barriers and stereotypes, soaring through the skies and history books alike. Yet their service doesn't magically erase the racial tensions back home. It's a bittersweet victory, a reminder that the fight for equality is far from over. Now, let's pivot to the enduring legacy of Pearl Harbor. This isn't just a military footnote. It's a turning point that reshapes global dynamics. Pearl Harbor galvanizes the U.S. into a superpower role, forever altering its foreign policy stance. Isolationism, once a cozy comfort zone, is tossed out the window. Post-war, the U.S. takes center stage in global affairs, becoming a founding member of the United Nations and a key player in shaping the New World Order. The echoes of Pearl Harbor reverberate through time, influencing decisions from the Cold War to conflicts in the Middle East. But let's not sugarcoat it. The attack also leaves scars and lessons in its wake. The internment of Japanese Americans remains a dark chapter, a cautionary tale of fear and prejudice overriding justice and humanity. Over 120,000 people are uprooted from their lives, a stark reminder that in times of crisis, even a nation built on freedom can falter. As you stand there, reflecting on the whirlwind of events and changes, you realize that Pearl Harbor is more than just a date or a place. It's a symbol of resilience, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to rise from the ashes. It's a story of transformation, of a nation waking up to its potential and responsibilities on the global stage. And while the attack was a day of infamy, it was also a day that sparked a journey towards a future where the United States would wield both power and influence on an unprecedented scale. So there you have it, a tale of audacity and aftermath, of courage and contradiction. Pearl Harbor isn't just history, it's a mirror reflecting the complexities of human nature, where myths and realities intertwine. As you drift off with these thoughts, remember, history isn't a distant story. It's a living, breathing narrative that continues to shape the world we inhabit today. And just like that, you're not only a witness to the past, but a participant in its legacy. Sweet dreams, history buff. The saga continues. Stay curious, because the best stories are still to come. You're waking up in Tudor England, smack dab in the world of Henry Roman VIII, where the air is thick with ambition and the faint aroma of yesterday's mutton. This morning, you're not just rolling out of bed. You're launching into a day where every stitch of your clothing is a political statement. Forget about your favorite pair of sweatpants. Today, your outfit could make or break you at court. First things first, servants are bustling around like bees in a hive, but instead of honey, they're collecting silk, velvet, and the occasional whiff of mothballs. Welcome to the Tudor court, where your wardrobe isn't just a fashion statement, it's a declaration of allegiance. You want to make an entrance that screams sophistication and subtle power, not, I just rolled in from the provinces. Let's talk numbers, because in this world, your attire isn't just a pretty picture, it's practically a financial ledger. A nobleman's outfit could easily cost the equivalent of a small fortune, around £10 or more. For context, that's like blowing through £10, 000 today. Those silk stockings you're eyeing, they're not just a pop of colour, they're an investment in your social currency. And don't think you can just throw on whatever's hanging in the Tudor equivalent of your walk-in closet. No, every fabric, shade, and accessory is a strategic choice, like playing a sartorial game of chess. Wearing scarlet might suggest you're cozy with Cardinal Wolsey, while a shade of deep green could hint at support for the Howard family. It's like being a human billboard, where colors replace catchy slogans. Now, getting dressed is no solo mission. You've got a small team of attendants. Think of them as your personal stylists, but without the Instagram following, helping you navigate the labyrinth of fabric and formality. Their job is to make sure you don't just look like $1,000,000, but also that you're not committing a fashion faux pas that could land you in political hot water. Because in the Tudor court, your sleeve length could determine your social standing as much as your family tree. Once you're properly attired, the next step is making that all-important entrance. This isn't just a casual stroll into the dining hall. It's a power play. You want to glide in with the kind of grace that suggests you own the place, even if your family's only claim to fame is a half-forgotten skirmish in the Wars of the Roses. It's a delicate dance, pun intended, balancing the ostentation of your attire with the subtle cues of allegiance and ambition. But don't let the grandeur fool you. Underneath all that velvet and brocade, it's a high-stakes world where a single misstep could send you tumbling down the social ladder faster than you can say, Anne Boleyn. So, as you step into the hall, remember, every eye is on you, and every whisper is fodder for the court's relentless rumor mill. It's a world where appearances are everything, and a well-placed accessory might just be your ticket to the king's favor, or at least a wink from that charming lady-in-waiting. Welcome to a day in the Tudor court, where history's just another word for Monday morning. As you stride into the hall, basking in the velvet glow of the Tudor court, you're about to dive into the afternoon's main event, a whirlwind of feet and fabric known as the dance rehearsal. Don't be fooled, though. This isn't your average tick-tock shuffle. We're talking about a full-body workout that doubles as a social chess match, with each step a calculated move on the court's game board. The floor's a veritable stage, where every bow, curtsy, and spin can either elevate you to the heights of courtly favor or send you spiraling into obscurity. Dance wasn't just a pastime. It was a litmus test for your worthiness. The Tudors loved their dancing like they loved their intrigue, complex, risky, and with a touch of scandal. Enter the dance master, the real puppet master pulling the strings behind this elegant chaos. These men were the influencers of their day. Long before the term influencer was anything more than a gleam in the eye of a social media mogul. Think of them as the 16th century's answer to a viral choreographer, dictating the rhythms of the realm with a flick of the wrist and a tap of the foot. And just like today's trendsetters, one wrong move could see them unceremoniously booted from the king's favor. Let's talk specifics. You're not just flinging yourself around the dance floor like a toddler in a sugar rush. These dances had names, my friend, like the stately pavane and the lively galliard. The pavane was your goda for showing off those expensive threads you spent so much on this morning. It's a slow processional dance, perfect for a gentle glide across the floor to emphasize the luxurious flow of your garments. The galliard, on the other hand, is the cardio session of the Tudor dance world, a sprightly, bouncy affair that was a favorite of Henry Roman VIII himself, perhaps because it allowed him to flaunt his nimble prowess before the waistline expanded. Every step you take is a reflection of your social standing. You see, the closer you are to the king, the more intricate your dance. If you're just a nobody trying to keep up, you better hope your feet work miracles, because one misstep could see you sidelined faster than you can say, court jester. Watching the high-ranking nobles glide across the room is like witnessing a live-action chess game, where each move is both a strategic maneuver and a visual spectacle. And let's be real, the court was a place where appearances could be deceptive. The dance floor was a battlefield where alliances were made and broken, and your ability to execute a flawless volta could mean the difference between becoming the next earl of whatever or just another face in the tapestry. The dance master, armed with his trusty lute, was the kingmaker, subtly guiding the court's social hierarchy with his batons and beats. These dance rehearsals were no joke. They were practically boot camps. You'd better believe that if you weren't born with 2 left feet, you'd have to pay a pretty penny to ensure that your feet knew their right from their left. Hiring a dance master could cost you the equivalent of several £100s today, but skimping on this expense could see you permanently stationed on the sidelines, clutching your goblet of mead while others twirled their way to courtly success. The social stakes were high, and the pressure was on. It's one thing to impress with your wardrobe. It's another to seal the deal with a dance move that would make even the most stoic of courtiers raise an appreciative eyebrow. Forget the modern-day red carpet. This was where real reputations were made or broken. And while we're on the topic, let's bust a few myths. Sure, today's period dramas love to show these dances as romantic affairs filled with stolen glances and whispered secrets. But in reality, the dance floor was more about power plays than passion. It was less about love at first sight, and more about strategic alliances and political maneuvering. Cupid might have had a quiver full of arrows, but here, ambition was the bowstring. So, as you twirl and leap, remember that each move is a statement, not just of grace or agility, but of your place in the ever-shifting sands of courtly life. The stakes are high, and the room is filled with potential allies and rivals, each watching and waiting to see who will rise and who will fall. In the Tudor world, dancing wasn't just an art form, it was a way of life. And just like that, as the last note of the lute fades into the background, you're left not just catching your breath, but also calculating your next move in this grand, orchestrated game of life. Because in the Tudor court, every day is a dance, and every dance is a step towards your destiny. As you catch your breath, and the last strains of the lute echo into nothingness, the day pirouettes smoothly into evening. The great hall is a hive of anticipation, buzzing with courtiers ready to transform rehearsed steps into a grand spectacle. This isn't just any dance. It's the Tudor court's social Super Bowl, where every galliard jump and pavane slide doubles as a political maneuver. The candles flicker to life, casting a warm glow over faces flushed with both exertion and expectation. The air is filled with the scent of beeswax and the occasional whiff of sweat, because let's face it, even the most dignified noble can't escape perspiration when wrapped in layers of brocade. As the court assembles, it's clear this isn't merely about having a good time. It's a chance to shimmy your way into the king's good graces, or, if you're unlucky, his notorious wrath. Now, if you're thinking this is all about love and romance, let's pop that bubble right now. Sure, the Tudors had their fair share of steamy scandals, but the dance floor was less about larking eyes across the room and more about larking in alliances. This was matchmaking with a Machiavellian twist. The pavane, with its slow, deliberate steps, wasn't just an excuse to flaunt those painfully expensive threads. It was a delicate negotiation, each step a conversation in the subtle language of power. See, every glance, every bow, every calculated twirl was laden with meaning. When you dance the pavane, you're not just gliding past your partner, you're assessing them. A well-executed turn could suggest you're a reliable ally, while a misstep might hint at hidden cracks in your political armor. We've all seen movies where the hero sweeps their partner off their feet, but in Tudor England, the real sweepstakes were about securing a foot in the door of influence. And then there's the galliard, the 5-step dance that was as much about stamina as it was about skill. Henry Roman VIII himself was said to be a fan, before he got sidetracked by wives and waistlines. This dance was the ultimate show of vitality and vigor, and it wasn't just the king who was watching. Courtiers would watch with beady eyes, hoping to catch a glimpse of weakness, or worse, arrogance. A galliard wasn't just a dance. It was a test of endurance, an audition where every leap had the potential to propel you up the social ladder, or see you crash down more spectacularly than a lead balloon. Now, let's talk numbers. If you were a lord or lady of the court, maintaining your dance skills could cost you a pretty penny. Hiring a dance master could set you back the equivalent of a few £100s a year, but it was a necessary investment. After all, the cost of obscurity was much higher. And speaking of costs, let's not forget the expenses incurred from those lavish outfits, each one a testament to your rank and a financial commitment that would make even the most extravagant modern-day influencer break a sweat. As the music swells and the dance begins, the room transforms into a living tapestry of ambition and intrigue. Dancers weave intricate patterns across the floor, their movements a silent dialogue of alliances and rivalries. For some, this is a chance to catch the eye of a powerful patron or perhaps secure a strategic marriage. For others, it's an opportunity to subtly undermine a rival with a well-timed glance or an elegantly executed flourish. It's easy to romanticize this scene, to imagine it as a fairy tale of silk and candlelight. But the reality was more akin to a high-stakes poker game, where the wrong card or step could see you out of the game entirely. While the music might be sweet, the stakes were brutal. In a court where fortunes could change with the flick of a wrist, the dance floor was both a stage and a battlefield. And let's not forget the ever-watchful eyes of those not dancing, the courtiers lining the walls, sipping on their goblets of claret, whispering behind fans and feathered hats. Their role was just as crucial, for in the Tudor court, gossip was a currency as valuable as gold. A well-placed rumor could elevate or decimate reputations in the blink of an eye. So, as the evening unfolds and the dancers twirl beneath the flickering chandelier light, remember this: Tudor court dance was a masterclass in the art of subtlety. It was about more than just knowing your steps. It was about knowing your place and how to move beyond it. As the music slows and the dancers take their final bows, one thing is clear. This isn't just about who has the best moves. It's about who can move the game in their favor. And in this grand chess game of life, every step counts. Stay tuned, because the night is young, and in the Tudor court, the real dance has only just begun. But hold that thought, because the night is far from over. The dancers might have taken their final bows, but the musicians are just getting started. As the courtiers retreat to their seats, all eyes and ears turn to the minstrels who are about to transform this grand hall into a symphony of sound and spectacle. Welcome to the sonic heart of the Tudor court, where the music is as rich and complex as the political games playing out on the dance floor. Let's set the scene. The Tudor court orchestra, an ensemble of musical mercenaries plucked from across Europe, stands ready to dazzle. These aren't your average street buskers. We're talking about top-tier talent, the kind that would make a modern-day concert hall envious. Court musicians were the rock stars of their time, minus the pyrotechnics and fan clubs. Each one was a master of their craft, wielding instruments with names as exotic as their sounds: sackbuts, viols, lutes, and the ever-majestic harpsichord. Now, maintaining such a musical powerhouse was no small feat. It required a royal purse that could rival the deepest pockets of modern tycoons. The Tudor crown didn't just splash cash on silks and sapphires. It also poured a fortune into its musical maestros. The calculated cost for a single night's entertainment could easily soar to the equivalent of £5,000 in today's money. That's more than the annual salary of many an honest Tudor yeoman. And why such extravagance? Because, in the Tudor court, music wasn't merely an embellishment. It was a statement of power, prestige, and cultural supremacy. The economic impact of this musical investment was profound. Think of it as a kind of Renaissance stimulus package. Musicians were paid handsomely, not just to perform, but to compose, to innovate, and to ensure that England's soundscape was second to none. These tunesmiths hailed from all corners of Europe, bringing with them the rich tapestries of their native lands. Italian madrigals, French chansons, and Spanish villancicos mingled in a harmonious melting pot, creating a sound as cosmopolitan as the court itself. And let's not forget the political undertones. Each musical piece was a subtle nod or challenge to foreign powers. Inviting a prominent Italian composer to the English court wasn't just about sweet sounds. It was a diplomatic gesture, a wink across the channel, signaling alliances or rivalries. Henry Roman VIII, ever the master of public relations, understood that a well-timed symphony could be as effective as a well-placed treaty. But let's not romanticize this musical wonderland too much. Behind the curtain of harmony and melody lay the harsh realities of court life. Commissioning a piece of music wasn't just about artistic expression. It was a cutthroat competition. Composers jock-eyed for royal favor, each vying to produce a piece that would secure them a coveted place in the king's retinue. Failure to impress could see a musician packing their bags faster than you can say greensleeves. And speaking of greensleeves, here's a little myth to debunk. While legend credits Henry Roman VIII with composing this earworm, the reality is murkier. Sure, it's a tantalizing tale, a king with a quill penning love songs in his spare time. But the evidence is as shaky as a looped string under too much tension. It's more likely that the tune was a collaborative effort, patchwork of influences woven together by the court's musical elite. As the orchestra strikes up a galliard, the room vibrates with the energy of 100 strings and woodwinds. Each note is a brushstroke on the canvas of the evening, painting a picture of opulence and power. The music rises and falls like the fortunes of the courtiers themselves, each crescendo a reminder of the stakes at play. In this world, music is more than mere background noise. It's the heartbeat of the court. The international influences are as clear as a bell or a perfectly tuned harpsichord. The Italian influence is undeniable, with its intricate harmonies and daring counterpoints, a nod to the cultural powerhouse that was Renaissance Italy. Meanwhile, the haunting melodies of the Spanish court find their way into the repertoire, a testament to the ever-complex dance of diplomacy between England and Spain. And let's not ignore the local talent. English composers like Thomas Tallis and William Byrd were no slouches, crafting works that would echo through the ages. Their compositions were a source of national pride, a musical declaration of independence that said, "We can hold our own against the best of Europe." Their works were a blend of the traditional and the innovative, a reflection of a country finding its voice on the international stage. But what's the real takeaway here? Music at the Tudor court was much more than entertainment. It was a cultural juggernaut. It was a tool of diplomacy, a symbol of wealth, and a testament to the power of art to transcend borders and bring people together, at least until the next political scandal tore them apart. The musicians weren't just performers. They were cultural ambassadors, bridging gaps and building bridges with every note. So, as the evening's entertainment plays on, remember this. The Tudor court was a place where music and power were inextricably linked, a symphony of sound and strategy that resonated far beyond the walls of the palace. And while the musicians might not have had groupies or record deals, they held something even more valuable, the ear of the king and the pulse of the court. The night is still young, and in this world of music and machination, every note counts. Stay tuned, because the Tudor court isn't done playing its tune just yet. As the last notes of the evening symphony fade like a whisper into the night, the reality of court life starts seeping back in, as inescapable as the morning fog over the Thames. The grand revelry might be over, but the real dance, of alliances and whispers, has just begun. Courtiers huddle in clusters, their laughter as calculated as their bows, each group a hive of gossip and speculation. It's a scene as vivid as any painting by Holbein, but with more intrigue than a season of House of Cards. Let's start with the aftermath of these swirling festivities. The Tudor court was a place where rumors spread faster than wildfire, and tonight's events will be no exception. Every galliard leap and pavane slide has been scrutinized, dissected, and is now being repackaged into the latest courtly gossip. Did you see Lord So-and-so stumble during the galliard? A lady might whisper behind her fan, the implication being that his political fortunes might be just as unsteady. In this world, where perception is reality, tripping over your own feet could be as damaging as a plot against the crown. And speaking of plots, let's not forget that the dance floor was a veritable minefield of political maneuvering. Each step was a strategic move on a chessboard where the stakes were nothing less than power and survival. The after-party chatter isn't just idle talk. It's the court's version of intelligence gathering. Who danced with whom? Who exchanged those meaningful glances? And most importantly, who was left standing on the sidelines, clutching a goblet of claret and a bruised ego? While the modern mind might romanticize these gatherings as scenes out of a fairy tale, with velvet gowns and whispered sweet nothings, the truth is far more cutthroat. Every social interaction is a potential power play. A well-timed compliment can secure you a place in a powerful faction, while a poorly chosen word might see you exiled to the political wilderness. In Tudor England, the political landscape was as treacherous as the North Sea, and navigating it required the skill of a seasoned sailor. Now, let's talk about the economic backdrop of this grand spectacle. Maintaining your place in this society wasn't just about having the right connections. It was also a question of cold, hard cash. The cost of participating in court life was staggering. A single outfit could cost as much as a year's worth of a craftsman's wages, and keeping up with the latest fashions was as relentless as it was expensive. It's like trying to keep up with the Joneses, except the Joneses are royalty, and their idea of keeping up involves silk, jewels, and a small fortune in tailoring. So why did people put themselves through this? Why spend fortunes on clothes and dancing lessons, only to risk it all on the whims of a capricious monarch? The answer, dear listener, lies in the promise of power. In a society where the king's favor was the ultimate currency, being close to the throne could elevate you from obscurity to influence in the blink of an eye. And while the climb was perilous, the rewards were immense. A title, lands, or even a strategic marriage that could secure your family's place in the annals of history. But let's not ignore the darker side of this quest for power. For every success story, there were countless tales of those who fell from grace. The Tudor court was a place where fortunes could change overnight, often with as little warning as a summer storm. One day you're the king's favorite, the next you're relegated to the Tower of London, with nothing more than your tarnished reputation for company. It's a world where the stakes are high, and the price of failure is steep. And now, let's address the elephant in the room, the romanticized image of Tudor England. Thanks to countless books, movies, and TV dramas, we've been fed a steady diet of knights in shining armor and ladies in distress. But scratch the surface, and you'll find a society that's more Game of Thrones than Cinderella. The court was a place of ambition, where the real magic wasn't in fairy godmothers, but in the art of political survival. Take the case of Anne Boleyn, one of the most famous figures of the Tudor era. Her story is often spun as a tragic romance, but in reality, it was a masterclass in political maneuvering. Anne played the game of court politics like a maestro, navigating the treacherous waters of Henry Roman VIII affections with skill and precision. But even she couldn't escape the dangers of court life, eventually falling victim to the very system she had mastered. Her rise and fall serve as a cautionary tale, a reminder that in the Tudor court, love and ambition were often two sides of the same coin. And what about the broader impact of these courtly games? The Tudor court wasn't just the stage for personal dramas. It was the epicenter of English politics and culture. Decisions made here could ripple out to affect the entire country, shaping the course of history. The alliances formed on the dance floor could lead to changes in policy, shifts in power, and even wars. It's a reminder that in the Tudor world, every action had consequences, and those consequences could be felt far beyond the walls of the palace. As we draw the curtains on this evening of dance and drama, let's take a moment to reflect on the legacy of the Tudor court. It was a place of contradictions, where beauty and brutality coexisted, where the grandeur of the spectacle masked a grittier reality. It was a world where the pursuit of power drove men and women to extraordinary lengths, and where the line between success and failure was as thin as a razor's edge. In the end, the Tudor court was a reflection of the human condition itself, filled with ambition, desire, and the eternal quest for significance. It's a world that continues to captivate us, not because of its fairy tale veneer, but because of the raw humanity that lay beneath. So, as you drift off to sleep, pondering the intrigues of the past, remember this: the dance of history is never truly over, and the lessons of the Tudor court are as relevant today as they were 500 years ago. In the dimly lit halls of 18th century Europe, where the smell of intrigue was as potent as the powdered wigs, there was a little-known German princess named Sophia. She wasn't exactly born with a silver spoon in her mouth, more like a slightly tarnished one from a lesser-known duchy called Anhalt-Zerbst. Not exactly the VIP lounge of Europe, but hey, everyone's got to start somewhere, right? Young Sophia was thrust into a world where family dynamics were a curious mix of affection and political maneuvering, the kind that would make a Game of Thrones scriptwriter take notes. Sophia had a mother, Johanna Elizabeth of Holstein-Gardorf, who was as ambitious as she was dramatic. Johanna was the kind of parent who saw her children as pawns in the great chess game of European politics. If Sophia was hoping for bedtime stories, she was likely disappointed with lessons in diplomacy instead. Johanna saw potential in Sophia to climb the social ladder, and not just any rung, but one that led to the Russian court. In the 1740s, Russia was a place ruled by Empress Elizabeth, who had a penchant for parties and apparently matchmaking. Elizabeth was on the lookout for a bride for her nephew, Peter, the future heir to the Russian throne. And in the world's oddest episode of The Bachelor, Sophia was invited to compete for the rose, or rather, the crown. Sophia's journey to Russia wasn't just a quick jaunt across Europe. It was more of an epic trek by 18th century standards, crossing roughly 300 kilometers from Stettin, now Szczecin in Poland, to Moscow. By the time she arrived, Sophia had learned enough Russian to impress the Empress, a feat akin to passing your language final without Google Translate. Her mastery of the language and her conversion to Eastern Orthodoxy, because why not change your entire belief system for a shot at power, earned her a new name, Catherine. If you're keeping track, Catherine was now in Russia, navigating a sea of courtly intrigue with more grace than a prima ballerina. Now about Peter, her intended groom. This guy was not exactly Prince Charming. Imagine a grown man obsessed with toy soldiers and lacking the political acumen of a soggy crouton. Marrying Peter was like being handed a perfectly good car with no wheels. But this was the world of arranged marriages, where love was less of a factor than political alliances. Catherine understood that if she wanted to survive and thrive in the Russian court, she'd need to be more cunning than a fox in a henhouse. Catherine quickly learned that court life was a hazardous dance of alliances. The Russian nobility, known as the boyars, were as fickle as they were powerful. They could make or break a ruler with the snap of their fingers. Catherine had to tread carefully, using her wit to outmaneuver rivals and win allies. Her charm and intelligence made her a favorite among the influential, and she won the hearts of many with her commitment to the Russian people. She once said, "I am one of the people," a declaration that wasn't just about fitting in, but about genuinely understanding the nation she was destined to lead. The real turning point came when Empress Elizabeth died in 1762, and Peter ascended the throne as Peter Roman III. His reign was short, lasting a mere 6 months before Catherine, with the support of the military and the nobility, staged a coup. Peter's reign was like a brief, awkward dance at a high school prom. Everyone knew it was better to just stop the music. On July 9, 1762, Catherine was proclaimed Empress of Russia. It was a bold move, a masterstroke of political maneuvering that would make any modern politician envious. And so, Catherine the Great began her rule, transforming from a minor German princess into one of the most formidable rulers in history. Her ascent was not just about wearing a crown. It was about redefining what it meant to lead a nation. She was a political maestro, orchestrating a symphony of reforms that would shape Russia for generations. Catherine's story is a testament to the power of wit, ambition, and the occasional strategic coup to flip the script of history. Catherine's rise to power wasn't just a fairy tale of a princess finding her throne. It was a high-stakes chess game where the stakes were life and power. Imagine a world where betrayal is as common as tea time, and your allies today might be your adversaries tomorrow. Catherine had mastered this world with the finesse of a grandmaster. Her coup d'etat in 1762 was a daring gambit, but it was a calculated risk, like betting your life savings on a roulette wheel and then rigging it for good measure. Peter Roman III, bless his misguided heart, was more interested in playing toy soldiers than ruling an empire. His policies, like the ill-fated decision to ally with Prussia, were about as popular as a leaky umbrella in a Russian winter. Catherine, with her keen political eye, saw an opportunity. She rallied support from the military, the nobility, and pretty much anyone who realized that Peter's reign was a sinking ship. The coup itself was executed with precision. On July 8, 1762, Catherine rode to the Winter Palace with the Imperial Guard, and by the next day, Peter had voluntarily abdicated. It was less a peaceful transfer of power and more a swift political decapitation. Once securely on the throne, Catherine wasted no time setting her sights on reform. She had a vision for Russia that would drag it, kicking and screaming, into the modern age. But as you might guess, modernizing an empire wasn't like redecorating a living room. It was more akin to renovating a mansion with no plumbing, heating, or reliable electricity. And the costs, astronomical. In fact, Catherine's military campaigns alone consumed nearly 50% of the state budget, which was as tight as a corset on a feast day. Catherine's economic policies were ambitious. She promoted the development of new towns and industries, such as the establishment of the Free Economic Society in 1765. This society aimed to encourage innovation in agriculture and industry, a bit like Russia's version of Shark Tank, but with more wigs and fewer catchy slogans. She also understood the importance of trade. Under her rule, the number of factories in Russia doubled, and she opened up the Black Sea for commerce, a move that would have made any economist of the time swoon. But let's not paint too rosy a picture here. Catherine's reforms, while visionary, often came at a steep price. The serfs, who made up about 90% of the population, bore the brunt of the economic changes. If you were a serf, your life was a perpetual cycle of toil and tribute, with little hope of mobility unless you fancied rebellion or an unlikely lardery win. Catherine's support from the nobility came at a cost. She tightened serfdom's chains to ensure her powerful backers remained content. It was realpolitik at its most ruthless, and she wielded it like a scalpel. Socially, Catherine was a patron of the arts and education. She founded the Smolny Institute for Noble Maidens in 1764, Russia's first state-financed higher education institution for women, making her a pioneer in women's education at a time when the idea was more radical than a punk rock concert in a monastery. Her court became a hub for Enlightenment thinkers, earning her correspondence with luminaries like Voltaire and Diderot. Yet, despite these progressive moves, she maintained a firm grip on power, wary of any dissent that might bubble up from her reforms. Catherine's reign was a study in contrasts, a ruler who embraced Enlightenment ideals while reigning with an iron fist. Her modernization efforts transformed Russia into a formidable European power, but they also exposed the deep social divides that would, in time, fuel discontent. This balancing act between progress and control was a tightrope walk that would make any acrobat tremble. Her story is a testament to the complexities of leadership and the moral ambiguities that come with the crown. As we delve deeper into her reign, it's clear that Catherine was not just a ruler, but a shrewd tactician navigating the treacherous waters of imperial politics with the grace of a swan and the cunning of a fox. As Catherine the Great continued her tightrope act between progress and control, she set her sights on cultural transformation. Now, when we talk about Catherine's cultural renaissance, think of it as a makeover, but for an entire empire. This wasn't just a dab of rouge and a new wig. It was a full-on glam squad intervention for Russia's cultural scene. Under her watchful eye, the arts didn't just flourish. They erupted like a firework display over the Winter Palace. Catherine was an avid art collector, and by avid, I mean she amassed over 4,000 paintings during her reign. That's right. While some people collect stamps or rare coins, Catherine collected masterpieces like Rembrandt's and Rubens. Her art collection was the foundation for what would become the Hermitage Museum, a place so grand it could make the Louvre feel like an IKEA showroom. But was all this patronage about a genuine love for the arts, or was it more of a strategic move in the grand chess game of European politics? Catherine corresponded with Enlightenment thinkers, Voltaire, Diderot, you name it, like a 21st century influencer sliding into DMs. She even invited Diderot to Russia and paid him handsomely for his library, which she graciously allowed him to keep using until his death. Talk about a long-term loan. But here's the rub. While Catherine's letters were full of Enlightenment rhetoric, her actions sometimes sang a different tune. She read Voltaire's works like bedtime stories, yet didn't quite embrace the whole liberty and equality philosophy when it came to her own subjects. In reality, Catherine's reign was a paradox, where she championed progressive ideas but kept a tight lid on dissent. Her enlightened facade was partly a PR campaign to position herself as an intellectual heavyweight on the European stage. She was savvy enough to know that being seen as a patron of the arts and ideas gave her cultural clout. Think of her as the original influencer, curating her image with the precision of a social media guru, yet controlling the narrative as tightly as a Broadway director. Despite the intellectual posturing, Catherine's reign saw censorship tighten like a noose. The number of banned books increased, and any whiff of sedition was snuffed out with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Nakaz, her legal code influenced by Montesquieu and Beccaria, was touted as a beacon of enlightenment. Yet, it ultimately served more as a manifesto to impress her European peers than a working document to liberate her people. Now, let's not forget the theatre, darling. Catherine wasn't just a backstage pass holder. She was writing the scripts. She penned several plays herself, though they were less likely to be seen on Broadway and more in the Winter Palace's private theatre. Her works were often heavy on moral lessons, as if Aesop's fables had been adapted for the stage with an imperial twist. It was her way of playing both playwright and critic, while subtly reinforcing her rule. As for the music scene, Catherine's court was the place to be. She imported Italian opera like it was going out of style, and even commissioned the first Russian opera, The Miller, who was a wizard, a cheat, and a matchmaker, quite the mouthful, and a testament to her knack for blending Russian culture with European sophistication. Her passion for opera was so intense it could rival a teenager's obsession with K-pop, yet it was also a tool for wielding soft power, drawing in foreign dignitaries with the allure of culture and elegance. But as the curtain rises on Catherine's cultural renaissance, it's important to remember the broader impact. Her efforts elevated Russia's standing in the eyes of Europe, turning it from a cultural backwater into a serious contender on the artistic stage. Yet, for all the shimmering facade of progress, the reality was that her cultural policies often served the elite, leaving the serfs to continue their struggle in the mud and mire. Catherine's cultural endeavors were both a genuine passion and a strategic move to secure her legacy. They were a testament to her understanding of power, how to wield it, maintain it, and make it appear benevolent. Her reign reveals the complexities of leadership, where image and reality often dance a delicate waltz, and where the line between genuine passion and political maneuvering is thinner than a courtier's patience. As we continue to unravel Catherine's story, it's clear that her legacy is a tapestry woven with threads of contradiction. She was a ruler who embraced the arts with open arms, yet wielded power with an iron fist. Her love for Enlightenment ideals was as much about shaping her image as it was about shaping her empire. She knew how to play the game of thrones like a virtuoso, conducting her court with the precision of a maestro. But in a world where perception often trumps reality, Catherine's greatest triumph was not just her cultural renaissance, but her ability to craft a narrative that continues to captivate us centuries later. But Catherine the Great didn't just stop at collecting paintings and wooing Enlightenment philosophers. No, she had bigger fish to fry, like expanding the Russian Empire, until it practically burst at the seams. Picture this. Catherine's foreign policy was a bit like her art collection, ambitious, expansive, and not afraid to make a statement. Her reign was a tour de force of territorial acquisition, and she played the geopolitical chessboard with all the finesse of a seasoned grandmaster. First on the agenda was the Black Sea, a body of water that must have looked to Catherine like prime real estate. This was no mere summer home acquisition. It was about securing warm water ports for Russia. The Ottoman Empire had held onto the Crimean Peninsula for what seemed like forever, and Catherine decided it was high time to rewrite that part of history. Cue the Russo-Turkish Wars, a series of conflicts that would have made a reality TV producer salivate. Between 1768 and 1774, her forces battled the Ottomans, eventually signing the Treaty of Kusuk-Kaynarca. This treaty was a win-win for Catherine and a lose-lose for the Ottomans. It granted Russia not only the Crimean Khanate, but also access to the Black Sea. Talk about a power move. But wait, there's more. You see, Catherine was just getting warmed up. Her expansionist dreams took her sights to the west, where Poland lay like a tempting slice of geopolitical pie. The partition of Poland, a series of 3 diplomatic and military maneuvers between 1772 and 1795, saw Poland carved up like the turkey at a particularly aggressive Thanksgiving dinner. Russia, alongside Austria and Prussia, sliced and diced the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth until it ceased to exist as an independent state. Catherine bagged a hefty chunk of land, adding about 120,000 square kilometers to her empire. If there was a Nobel Prize for land acquisition, Catherine would have won it hands down. Now, let's address the elephant, or perhaps the wooden village, in the room, the infamous Potemkin villages. Here's where the legend and reality do a tango. Grigory Potemkin, Catherine's favorite general and rumored lover, supposedly erected fake, picturesque villages along the banks of the Dnieper River to impress her during her visit to newly acquired Crimea in 1787. It's the historical equivalent of tidying up your messy apartment before your mother visits. However, historical evidence suggests that the story of these sham villages might be more myth than reality, a bit of a smear campaign by Potemkin's political rivals. Still, the tale persists because, let's face it, it's a delicious slice of satire on the absurdities of court life. Catherine's military campaigns were not just about saber-rattling and territorial gains. They were strategic efforts to bolster Russia's standing on the global stage. Her wars with the Ottomans and the partitions of Poland weren't just land grabs. They were a clear message. Russia was no longer the awkward teenager of Europe. It was a major player in the continental power game. But these ambitious endeavors weren't without their costs. War is expensive, and Catherine's military escapades drained the coffers faster than you can say imperial overreach. The state's military expenditure soared to unprecedented heights, sometimes consuming over half of Russia's annual budget. It was like throwing a lavish party every weekend and hoping no one checks the bank balance. Yet, for all the glory and new land, the human cost was significant. The soldiers who fought in Catherine's campaigns often faced grueling conditions, and the conquered peoples were more likely to find themselves under the iron grip of Russian rule than the benevolent embrace of Enlightenment ideals. It's a harsh reminder that behind every great victory parade, there's usually a trail of hardship and sacrifice. Underneath all the pomp and circumstance, Catherine was a master of realpolitik. She understood that to keep the Russian Empire secure, she needed to play the long game. Her alliances and treaties were crafted with the foresight of a seasoned diplomat. The League of Armed Neutrality, formed in 1780, was Catherine's brainchild, aiming to protect neutral shipping rights during the American Revolutionary War. By rallying European powers like Sweden, Denmark, and Prussia, she deftly balanced power dynamics, protecting Russian interests while maintaining peace on her terms. But not all of Catherine's foreign policy moves were about war and territorial gains. She also knew when to let diplomacy take the lead. Her correspondence with European monarchs was as much about securing alliances as it was about maintaining Russia's image as a civilized, enlightened nation. It's a bit like a diplomatic charm offensive, with Catherine as the charismatic host of a never-ending international soiree. As we peel back the layers of Catherine's foreign policy, it becomes clear that her strategies were a mix of ambition, pragmatism, and a dash of theatrical flair. Her reign was a masterclass in the art of balancing expansion with diplomacy, showing that sometimes the pen, and the occasional well-placed cannon, truly is mightier than the sword. Yet, as with all grand narratives, there's a duality to Catherine's story. While she expanded Russia's borders and secured its place as a European powerhouse, her methods often left a trail of upheaval and discontent. Catherine's foreign adventures are a testament to her indomitable will and strategic acumen, but they also serve as a cautionary tale about the costs of empire building, where the pursuit of greatness can often overshadow the human stories caught in its wake. As we continue to explore her legacy, it's clear that Catherine was a ruler of ambition and contradiction, forever balancing the scales of power with the grace of a seasoned tightrope walker. As we continue our dive into the grand tapestry of Catherine the Great's reign, let's shift the focus to her final act, her legacy. Catherine's reign is a paradox wrapped in a coronation robe. She was both the architect of modern Russia and a ruler whose ambitions often came at a steep human cost. Her twilight years were no less complicated, filled with as much drama as an 18th-century Russian opera. The later years of her reign saw Catherine grappling with the twin challenges of securing her dynasty and reckoning with the social upheaval brewing beneath the surface. As she aged, so did her concerns about the future of her empire. Her son, Paul, was about as predictable as a Russian winter and twice as frosty. Catherine had little faith in his ability to rule, fearing he'd undo her life's work faster than you could say dynastic disaster. She even considered bypassing him altogether in favor of her grandson, Alexander, a move that would have sparked more palace intrigue than a season finale of a royal drama series. Yet, Catherine's health began to fail her before she could execute any grand plans for succession. On November 17, 1796, at the age of 67, she suffered a stroke and passed away the following day. Her death marked the end of an era, but not without the curtain closing on a bit of a cliffhanger. The succession crisis that followed was like a political soap opera, complete with power struggles, betrayals, and the ever-present shadow of Catherine's formidable legacy. Paul I, despite Catherine's misgivings, ascended the throne. His reign was a stark departure from his mother's, marked by erratic policies and a penchant for militaristic authoritarianism. Paul's insecurity about his legitimacy led him to implement sweeping changes, like reversing many of Catherine's reforms and imposing draconian measures on the nobility. It was as if he was trying to erase his mother's legacy with the zeal of a rebellious teenager clearing out the family attic. His reign, however, was short-lived. Paul was assassinated in 1801, a mere 5 years after taking the crown, in a coup that had the fingerprints of disgruntled nobles and even his own son, Alexander. So, what do we make of Catherine's legacy? Was she the visionary reformer Russia needed, or just a savvy political operator playing the hand she was dealt. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the messy middle. Catherine's reign was undeniably transformative. She expanded the Russian Empire by over 200,000 square miles, ushered in the Enlightenment ideals, and reformed the administration and military with a precision that would make any modern CEO proud. Under her rule, Russia's population swelled from 18 to 36 million, a testament to her empire's growth, albeit one that masks the human toll of serfdom and war. Economically, Catherine's policies laid the groundwork for a more modern Russian state. She encouraged industrialization and agriculture, doubling the number of factories and establishing new trade routes that turned Russia into a formidable economic power. Yet, these advances often came on the backs of the peasantry, illustrating the harsh truth that progress for some often means hardship for others. Her economic vision was as much about securing her power as it was about modernizing the empire. Culturally, she left an indelible mark. The Hermitage Museum stands today as a bastion of her artistic legacy, a monument to her insatiable appetite for culture and beauty. Her patronage of the arts and education paved the way for a cultural renaissance, positioning Russia as a significant player on the European stage. Yet, beneath the veneer of sophistication, censorship and repression kept a tight lid on dissent, a reminder that her enlightened image sometimes masked a more authoritarian reality. In modern terms, Catherine's reign mirrors the dual nature of power itself. She was a ruler who understood that to maintain control, one must balance the carrot and the stick, the facade of progress with the reality of iron-fisted rule. Her life was a masterclass in political survival, a testament to her ability to navigate the treacherous waters of imperial politics with both grace and ruthlessness. Catherine's impact on Russia and the world is a study in contrast. She was both revered and reviled, a leader whose actions were as complex as the empire she governed. Her legacy is a reminder that history is rarely black and white. It's a kaleidoscope of ambition, progress, and the inevitable cost of power. Was she a visionary or a survivor? Perhaps she was both, a ruler who understood the weight of the crown and the delicate dance between ambition and reality. As we close the book on her story, Catherine the Great remains a towering figure in history, her life a symphony of power, progress, and paradox that continues to captivate us centuries later. In the sweltering summer of 1789, the streets of Paris aren't just bustling, they're practically boiling over. If you're there, you're not strolling leisurely with a baguette under your arm, but rather elbow-deep in the chaos of a society teetering on the brink. The air's thick with the scent of revolution. If revolution had a smell, it'd be a pungent mix of sweat, fear, and maybe a hint of burning pamphlets. You might think revolutions start with grand ideals and poetic speeches, but this one's got its roots firmly planted in something far more mundane, economics. And let's face it, nothing gets people more riled up than an economic crisis. The French crown, having spent like a teenager with their first credit card, finds itself drowning in debt. The 7 Years' War and the American Revolution, expensive habits, and who's footing the bill? Not the nobles, who are lounging in opulence, but the common folks, who are mostly just trying to figure out why their bread costs as much as a 21st century avocado toast. Now, bread might not seem like the stuff of rebellion, but in 1789, it's the cornerstone of the French diet, a staple so critical that its price can determine your daily mood, much like a Wi-Fi outage does today. In real terms, bread prices have doubled, and that's not just a pinch in the wallet. When over half of your income goes to bread alone, you're not just hungry, you're hangry. And hangry people, well, they make for excellent revolutionaries. As you navigate this powder keg of a city, you hear whispers of a place called the Bastille. It's not just a fortress, it's a symbol of royal tyranny, a grim reminder of oppression, right in the heart of Paris. On July 14, 1789, the simmering discontent boils over. Thousands of Parisians, tired of whispering, decide it's time for a little less talk and a lot more action. They storm the Bastille, not because it's brimming with prisoners, it holds a grand total of 7, but because it's a giant middle finger to the monarchy. The fall of the Bastille isn't just a physical act, it's a psychological victory, a loud and clear message that the people aren't just spectators in this drama. they're the leading roles. But let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. The storming of the Bastille is messy, chaotic, and brutally violent. Heads are literally rolling, and not in the figurative sense. Yet amidst the bloodshed, there's a spark of hope. The people are hungry for change, not just bread. As the dust settles, the National Assembly, a newly formed body trying to wrangle the chaos into some semblance of order, drafts the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. Talk about a mouthful. This document, a cousin to the American Declaration of Independence, declares liberty, equality, and fraternity as the new trinity. It's a noble idea, but like a New Year's resolution, easier said than done. The king, Louis Roman XVI, isn't exactly thrilled. His attempts to play nice are about as convincing as a cat pretending to enjoy a bath. He's not just dealing with a pesky uprising. He's facing the collapse of the very foundation his ancestors built. His indecisiveness makes Hamlet look like a go-getter, and as the clock ticks, so does the patience of the people. Fast forward a few months, and the situation is spiraling. The economy's in the toilet, the king's vacillating, and the political factions are multiplying like rabbits. Enter the Jacobins, a group of radical revolutionaries with a flair for the dramatic and a penchant for, well, not compromising. They seize control, and suddenly the revolution's taking a darker turn. The guillotine becomes the tool of choice, and the reign of terror looms on the horizon like a bad sequel. So here you are, in a city that's both the cradle and potential grave of revolutionary ideals. You're not just a passive observer. You're swept up in a whirlwind of change where each day could bring liberation or disaster. It's a reminder that revolutions, while romantic in hindsight, are anything but predictable in the moment. And as you lay your head down each night, the whispers of revolution outside your window are a lullaby and a warning, a testament to the power and peril of a people determined to rewrite their destiny. But hold on tight, because we're about to dive headfirst into the maelstrom of the reign of terror. This era, my friend, is where the French Revolution turns from a passionate outcry for liberty into a grim spectacle of paranoia and power struggles. At the heart of this transformation lies the Committee of Public Safety, an ironically named group that, well, didn't exactly prioritize safety. Formed in April 1793 to protect the newly established republic from internal and external threats, the committee quickly became the linchpin of revolutionary authority. Picture it as a mix between a reality TV show panel and a shadowy government agency, with a bit of a death wish. At its helm, Maximilien Robespierre, a man whose name still echoes through history like a sinister drumbeat. Initially, Robespierre was the poster boy for incorruptible virtue, earning the nickname the Incorruptible, a moniker that, given the circumstances, aged like milk left out in the sun. Robespierre's vision of revolutionary justice was as clear as mud. He believed in a kind of virtue that was enforced with the edge of a blade, quite literally. Enter the guillotine, an invention that was, ironically, designed to be a humane method of execution. Guillotine, darling, you have a twisted sense of humor. This device became the Grim Reaper's favorite accessory, dispatching enemies of the state with mechanical efficiency. During the height of the Reign of Terror, from 1793 to 1794, the guillotine was working overtime. Over 16,000 people met their end this way, with some historians estimating the number could be as high as 40,000 if you include those who died in prison or without trial. Revolutionary justice, it seems, was less about fairness and more about value. Now, let's not pretend that everyone in France was living in constant fear of the chop. For many, life went on, a surreal dance with danger as a backdrop. But if you were politically active, or just in the wrong place at the wrong time, well, you might have found yourself on the wrong end of a revolutionary tribunal. These kangaroo courts were set up quicker than you could say liberté, égalité, fraternité, and they often dispensed with such trifling matters as evidence or defense. And while Robespierre orchestrated this macabre symphony, another key player, Georges Danton, was striding through the political landscape with a very different tune. Danton was the kind of guy who would buy everyone around and then give a rousing speech about freedom and the rights of man. Initially an ally of Robespierre, the two eventually found themselves on opposite sides of the revolutionary coin. Danton, with his booming voice and larger-than-life persona, started to argue that perhaps, just maybe, things had gotten a tad out of hand. His calls for moderation and an end to the terror were about as welcome as a skunk at a garden party. In March 1794, Danton and his followers were arrested, charged with conspiracy, and you guessed it, guillotined in April. The revolution, it seems, had no room for half-measures or half-hearted revolutionaries. Meanwhile, the political paranoia that gripped France was spreading faster than fake news on social media. Everyone was a potential enemy, and accusations flew like confetti at a particularly paranoid parade. Neighbor turned against neighbor, friend against friend, in a desperate bid to prove their revolutionary fervor. The Committee of Public Safety, far from being a stabilizing force, had become an arbiter of life and death, with Robespierre pulling the strings like a macabre puppeteer. Yet, amidst this chaos, the contradictions of revolutionary justice became glaringly evident. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity were being enforced through fear, inequality, and betrayal. It was as if the revolution had taken a hard look at itself in the mirror and decided it like the reflection of a tyrant. So here we are, in a France where the air is thick with suspicion, and the streets run red with the blood of those who dared to dream a different dream. Robespierre's reign is reaching its zenith, yet the seeds of his downfall are already sown. The committee's grip on power is as tenuous as a tightrope walker in a hurricane, and the people are beginning to wonder if they've traded one despot for another. As the reign of terror rages on, the very fabric of French society is being torn apart and stitched back together in a patchwork of fear and fervor. The guillotine stands as a grim monument to the revolution's contradictions, while Robespierre and his cohorts navigate the shark-infested waters of revolutionary politics with all the grace of a drunk sailor. But don't get too comfortable. This story is far from over, and the revolution is anything but predictable. As we leave this chapter behind, remember that in this era, survival often hinged on a delicate balance of luck, loyalty, and staying one step ahead of the blade. The next phase promises more twists, turns, and unexpected alliances, with the shadow of the guillotine ever present, a reminder that in revolutionary France, the line between hero and villain was as thin as the edge of a knife. Surviving the reign of terror, where the stakes were higher than Louis Roman 16 coiffure. Let's dive into the daily grind of those trying to keep their heads, literally, during one of history's most infamous periods. Imagine, if you will, living in a world where alliances were your lifeline, discretion was your armor, and survival often came at the cost of your very soul. First off, alliances. Not just your average, let's grab a coffee friendships, but more like, if you scratch my back, I'll make sure you don't end up on the wrong end of a guillotine kind of deals. Political alliances became the currency of the day, more valuable than gold, which, by the way, was also in short supply. Take, for example, the Girondins and the Montagnards. Initially, they were two sides of the same revolutionary coin, but the Montagnards, with their radical zeal, saw the Girondins as a bit too moderate. And by moderate, I mean not quite as enthusiastic about chopping heads. Navigating these treacherous waters required the subtlety of a diplomat and the cunning of a fox. Camille Desmoulins, a journalist and passionate revolutionary, initially aligned with Robespierre. Yet, as the terror escalated, he found himself advocating for clemency, a stance that didn't exactly earn him brownie points with the Committee of Public Safety. In the ultimate irony, Desmoulins was guillotined in 1794, proving that even the most eloquent plea for mercy could fall on deaf ears when paranoia ruled. Speaking of paranoia, discretion was the name of the game. In a time when saying the wrong thing could land you a one-way ticket to the guillotine, people learned to keep their cards and their mouths close to their chest. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about not being noticed. The less you stood out, the better your chances of waking up the next morning. Think of it as a brutal game of don't be the tallest poppy, except the stakes were your life. Letters from the period reveal the fear and caution that permeated daily interactions. Consider the case of Jean-Baptiste Carrier, a delegate to the National Convention known for his ruthless efficiency in suppressing counter-revolutionaries. Carrier's involvement in the infamous drownings at Nantes showed a chilling pragmatism that left little room for dissent. His correspondences are filled with cryptic language, reflecting a man constantly looking over his shoulder, aware that today's ally could be tomorrow's accuser. And then there was the economy. or what was left of it. The revolution had turned the French economic system into a tangled mess of inflation and scarcity. With bread prices soaring and the assignat, the revolutionary currency, losing value faster than a lead balloon, survival often meant mastering the black market. Smuggling became a skill as essential as reading, with everyone from farmers to urbanites trading goods under the table to make ends meet. It's no surprise that during these times, the art of discretion extended to the home front as well. Families lived with the constant fear that a neighbor could turn them in for a perceived slight or a misunderstood comment. The walls had ears, and sometimes they also had very loose lips. It was a society where trust was a luxury few could afford. But let's not forget the cost of survival. While some managed to navigate the chaos with a deft hand, others paid dearly. The reign of terror did not discriminate. It had a voracious appetite for blood, and the more it consumed, the more it demanded. The guillotine may have been the symbol of this era, but it was the hidden scars, the psychological toll, that left a lasting mark on the survivors. Take the story of the Carmelite nuns of Campigny. Accused of counter-revolutionary activities, these women faced their fate with a resolve born of unshakable faith. Their final act of singing hymns on the way to the scaffold became a powerful testament to the human spirit's resilience. Yet, behind the romanticized imagery of noble sacrifice lies the harsh reality that their deaths were a tragic waste, a consequence of a world gone mad with revolutionary zeal. So how do you survive a reign of terror? With a blend of luck, strategy, and the occasional well-timed act of contrition. Those who navigated these treacherous waters successfully often did so by remaining adaptable, like political chameleons, blending into the ever-shifting landscape of power and influence. It wasn't just about outsmarting the guillotine. It was about understanding the complex tapestry of human motivations and alliances. Yet, even as individuals fought for survival, the revolution itself was evolving. The Committee of Public Safety's grip was tightening, but the seeds of its downfall were already sown. Robespierre's insistence on virtue, enforced at the edge of a blade, was becoming increasingly untenable. His enemies were multiplying, and whispers of dissent were growing louder with each passing day. In this world of shadows and whispers, where the line between hero and villain was as thin as a strand of hair, the revolution continued its relentless march. As we move forward, the question remains, who will emerge from the chaos unscathed, and at what cost? Stay tuned, because the French Revolution is about to take another dramatic turn. The stage is set for a showdown that will redefine the very essence of power and justice in a world teetering on the edge. And so, the stage is set for another act in this grand drama of revolutionary France, where economic chaos is the uninvited guest that refuses to leave. Imagine, if you will, that you're a Parisian trying to navigate this tempestuous period. Spoiler alert, it's not a walk in the park, unless that park is on fire and your shoes are made of lead. Let's talk inflation, shall we? Not the kind that makes your soufflé rise, but the kind that turns your pockets inside out. The assignat, France's revolutionary currency, was printed faster than conspiracy theories on the internet. By 1795, its value had plummeted by a staggering 99%. Yes, you heard me right, 99%. Picture trying to buy a loaf of bread only to find it costs more than your rent, assuming you still have a roof over your head. Pre-revolution, a pound of bread cost around 8 sous. By the height of the terror, it could set you back 14 to 18 sous, if you could even find it. Ah, scarcity. The revolution's less glamorous sidekick. The bread lines were longer than a marathon, and not nearly as fun. Hunger was the great equalizer, bringing everyone from aristocrats to artisans to the same grim realization. You can't eat ideals. And while the revolutionary government promised equality, the reality was a bit more nuanced. Speaking of equality, let's debunk that romantic myth. The revolution touted liberté, égalité, fraternité, like a catchy slogan, but the lived experience was as uneven as a cobblestone street. Sure, the nobles were out, their opulent lifestyles stripped away faster than you could say, "Vive la Révolution." But those who knew how to play the game, how to maneuver through the political minefield, well, they thrived. They were the ones who could turn a crisis into an opportunity, like a chef whipping up a gourmet dish out of scraps. Take the story of Jean-Paul Marat, a journalist with a gift for rallying the masses. He thrived on chaos, leveraging his newspaper, El Army du Pupil, friend of the people, to fan the flames of discontent. While many starved, Marat wielded influence like a sword, cutting through the propaganda and shaping the revolutionary narrative to his advantage. The people adored him, until they didn't. In 1793, he was assassinated by Charlotte Corday, proving that even the loudest voice could be silenced in a heartbeat. Meanwhile, the black market was alive and well, a shadow economy where anything and everything had a price. Need flour? It'll cost you. Want to avoid the draft? That'll cost you even more. The streets of Paris were teeming with whispers and backdoor deals, a clandestine bazaar where survival was the currency. But amidst the chaos, some found ways to thrive, embracing the madness like a long-lost cousin. The tale of Théroigne de Méricourt is a testament to resilience. A singer turned revolutionary, she used her wit and charm to navigate the political landscape, becoming a symbol for women's rights. Yet her story is also a cautionary tale. She was eventually imprisoned and died in obscurity, a reminder that the revolution could be as fickle as a cat on a hot tin roof. The myth of revolutionary equality was further unraveled in the salons of Paris, where the elite gathered to debate, drink, and occasionally plot. These gatherings were the social media of their day, a place to exchange ideas, and sometimes more tangible goods. It was here that the likes of Madame de Staël held court, her sharp intellect cutting through the rhetoric like a hot knife through butter. But while these salons promised a level playing field, the reality was a pecking order as rigid as ever. As we delve deeper into the economic underbelly of the Terror, it's clear that the revolution was less about breaking chains and more about who got to wear them. The Committee of Public Safety, in its quest to enforce virtue, was inadvertently creating a marketplace of fear, where loyalty was bought and sold like stocks in a volatile market. In this world, survival wasn't just about dodging the guillotine. It was about understanding the intricate dance of power and influence. Those who thrived did so by staying one step ahead, adapting to the ever-changing landscape with the finesse of a ballet dancer and the cunning of a fox. So here we are, in a France where the dream of equality is as elusive as a shadow in the night. The revolution, with all its promises, is proving to be a double-edged sword, cutting through the fabric of society with ruthless precision. And as we stand on the precipice of another chapter, the question looms large. Who will navigate this labyrinth unscathed? And what price will they pay for their survival? Stay tuned, because the revolution story is far from over, and the next act promises to be as turbulent as the last. The players are set, the stage is lit, and the drama of revolutionary France continues to unfold with all the unpredictability of a storm at sea. As the storm of the French Revolution rages on, the reign of terror tightens its grip like a vice that just won't let go. But spoiler alert, all storms eventually pass, and this one is no exception. By mid-1794, even the most fervent revolutionaries are starting to question whether the endless carousel of executions is really the best way to foster liberty, equality, and fraternity. Enter the Thermidorian reaction, a fancy term for when the revolution decided it needed a major reality check. July 27, 1794, marked a turning point as dramatic as a soap opera cliffhanger. Maximilien Robespierre, the man who had been steering this terrifying ship, suddenly finds himself on the wrong side of history. In a twist that would make even Shakespeare nod in approval, the National Convention turns against him. It's like the ultimate political unfriending, except this one comes with a guillotine appointment. By July 28, Robespierre is experiencing firsthand the efficiency of the blade he'd so fervently championed. Talk about irony with a capital I. The Thermidorian reaction isn't just a reaction to Robespierre's downfall, it's a full-blown course correction. The revolutionaries, suddenly realizing they've been riding a roller coaster straight into madness, decide it's time to pump the brakes. The Committee of Public Safety is stripped of its powers, and the machinery of the terror grinds to a halt. It's as if France collectively decided that maybe, just maybe, less bloodshed might be a good thing. Who knew? With the guillotine finally taking a breather, the political landscape begins to shift. The moderates, those who had managed to keep their heads, literally emerge from the shadows. The Jacobins, once the poster children for revolutionary zeal, find themselves out of favor faster than you can say l'égalité. It's like the revolution itself, is going through a midlife crisis, swapping out its radical ideals for something a bit more, shall we say, sustainable. Economically, post-Terror France is a minefield. The assignat is still worth about as much as a monopoly dollar, and the bread lines stretch longer than the Seine. But without the constant threat of execution hanging over them, the French people can finally focus on more pressing matters, like, surviving. The government, trying to dig itself out of the mess it's made, attempts to stabilize the currency and revitalize trade. It's a bit like trying to patch a sinking ship with chewing gum, but you have to start somewhere. The aftermath of the Terror leaves a legacy as complex as a French wine pairing. The ideals of the revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, are still there, but they're battered and bruised, like a boxer who's gone too many rounds. The harsh reality is that while the revolution brought about significant changes, it also left deep scars. The social fabric of France is forever altered, and the echoes of the guillotine linger in the collective consciousness. Despite the chaos, there are lessons to be gleaned from this tumultuous period. The Reign of Terror serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ideological purity taken to extremes. It shows us that the pursuit of virtue, when wielded as a weapon, can become a tool of oppression. The revolutionaries, in their quest to create a utopia, inadvertently forged a dystopia, a stark reminder that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Yet, amidst the darkness, there's a glimmer of hope. The Thermidorian reaction, while not a panacea, signals a shift towards pragmatism. It's a recognition that perhaps the revolution's greatest legacy isn't its immediate outcomes, but the enduring conversation it sparked about the nature of power, justice, and human rights. France, despite its scars, emerges from the Terror with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to forge a new path. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour through revolutionary France, it's worth reflecting on the human condition, our capacity for both great idealism and profound folly. The French Revolution, with all its bloodshed and brilliance, is a testament to the complexity of human nature. It's a story of dreams and nightmares, of hope and despair, a brutal yet beautiful reminder that progress is never a straight line, but a winding road fraught with peril and possibility. So next time you're sipping a glass of Bordeaux or biting into a crusty baguette, spare a thought for the revolutionaries who, amidst the chaos, dared to dream of a better world. Their story, much like history itself, is a tapestry of contradictions, romantic and real, inspiring and sobering, a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who dared to challenge the status quo. And as we look to the future, it's a story that reminds us that while the past may be prologue, the power to shape our destiny remains firmly in our hands. Marie Antoinette's story doesn't start with cake, or even in France for that matter. Nope, we're kicking things off in Austria, where the young Archduchess was born on November 2, 1755. That's right, smack dab in the middle of the Habsburg dynasty, one of the most powerful families in Europe. Her birth name was Maria Antonia Josepha Johanna, but let's be real, Marie Antoinette rolls off the tongue a bit easier, especially when you're busy making history or trying to survive it. Now, you might think young Marie was lounging around in palatial splendor, but her life was more like a historical episode of Survivor, Royal Edition. Growing up as the 15th child of Empress Maria Theresa and Emperor Francis I, she was a pawn in the grand chess game of European politics. And spoiler alert, she was about to be moved all the way to the French court. But before we get there, let's talk about those early years. Marie's education wasn't exactly the stuff of Ivy League dreams. Sure, she learned the essentials, a bit of music, some languages, and how to walk without tripping over 1,000 layers of silk. But her formal education, let's just say it was as haphazard as a game of charades. Her handwriting was reportedly atrocious, and her French, which would become pretty important later, was less than fluent. Now, Marie's future was sealed before she even knew what a future was. Cue Empress Maria Theresa, the ultimate matchmaker of 18th century Europe. She arranged a strategic marriage for her daughter with Louis Auguste, the Dauphin of France, sealing a Franco-Austrian alliance that was about as popular as a tax collector at a free market. The political stakes were high, but Louis Roman XV, the then King of France, wasn't looking for love. He was securing borders. So at the tender age of 14, Marie set off to meet her fate with a husband she hadn't even met yet. Talk about a blind date with destiny. The journey from Austria to France was no quick jaunt. It was a long, grueling trek, over 800 kilometers, mind you, through terrain that wasn't exactly five-star accommodations. When Marie finally arrived in France, she was stripped of everything Austrian, from her clothes to her entourage, in a bizarre ceremonial undressing at the border. This was supposed to symbolize her new French identity, but it probably just felt like an awkward wardrobe malfunction on a national scale. And then there was the wedding. Ah, the grand affair of 1770. Marie and Louis Auguste tied the knot in a ceremony that was as extravagant as it was uncomfortable. Picture this: 5,000 guests, a feast for the ages, and fireworks that could rival a modern-day New Year's Eve in Times Square. But the real fireworks were yet to come. Louis Auguste, the awkward 15-year-old dauphin, was more interested in larks and keys than marital bliss, which meant their wedding night was about as romantic as a library's closing time announcement. For Marie, adjusting to life at the French court was like trying to dance the waltz in a marsh pit. Versailles was a world unto itself, with rules and rituals that could make the most seasoned diplomat's head spin. The palace was a sprawling maze of opulence and intrigue, housing over 5,000 courtiers, all vying for a piece of the royal pie. Marie had to learn the etiquette of the French court, which was a bit like trying to crack the Da Vinci Code, but with more wigs and less sense. Life at Versailles was a series of public performances. Marie's every move was scrutinized, from the way she dressed to the way she smiled, or didn't. She was expected to perform her duties as Dauphine, which included producing an heir, a task that had its own set of challenges given the young couple's less than enthusiastic start. The pressure was on, and everyone from the king to the kitchen staff had an opinion about the royal couple's, shall we say, productivity. Despite the stiff expectations, Marie Antoinette had a knack for making a splash. She charmed many with her youthful exuberance and fashion-forward style. Her elaborate hairstyles were the talk of the court, reaching heights that defied gravity and possibly common sense. Her wardrobe was a dazzling array of silks and satins, a sartorial spectacle that both dazzled and drained the treasury. But while she was scoring high on the style meter, her political savvy was still in the trial-and-error phase. Her relationship with Louis Roman XVI, who became king in 1774, was evolving too. The couple eventually grew closer and managed to have 4 children, an accomplishment that silenced some critics but fueled others who scrutinized their every move. And yet, despite the pressure, Marie found ways to carve out moments of joy, often retreating to her private retreat at the Petit Trianon, a gift from Louis where she could escape the prying eyes of court life. In these early years at Versailles, Marie Antoinette's life was an intricate tapestry of opulence and obligation, laughter and loneliness. She was a queen in training, navigating the treacherous waters of political alliances and public opinion. Her story was only beginning, and little did she know the turbulent tides of history were about to turn. Marie Antoinette's early days at Versailles were a heady mix of excitement and bewilderment, much like being handed the keys to a Ferrari without knowing how to drive stick. The palace was a marvel of excess, a sprawling monument to the kind of opulence that could make a sultan weep with envy. Marble halls, gilded mirrors, chandeliers that seemed to drip with light. It was a place where even the wallpaper probably had a pedigree. But beneath this glittery facade lay a serpent's nest of intrigue and expectation, coiled around the young queen, whispering the sweet, seductive promises of luxury and power. Now let's get this out of the way. Marie Antoinette did not, I repeat, did not say, "Let them eat cake." This infamous phrase, supposedly uttered upon hearing that her subjects had no bread, was actually penned by Jean-Jacques Rousseau in his Confessions, a book published when Marie was just a child. Yet, like a persistent bad penny, the legend stuck. It's a catchy line, sure, but it's as historically accurate as a Hollywood blockbuster. The reality was much more complex and far less meme-worthy. But what about the nickname Madame Deficit? That one's a little harder to shake off. Marie Antoinette's spending habits were legendary, and not always in a good way. Her penchant for fashion was the stuff of legend and ledger books alike. In 1775, for example, she spent the modern equivalent of $3, $6 million on clothing alone. Yes, you heard that right. She could have probably bought a small island with her wardrobe budget. Her fashion choices were avant-garde, to say the least. Enormous gowns that required their own zip codes towering hairpieces adorned with everything from feathers to model ships. Marie was the original fashion influencer, setting trends that had the courtiers scrambling to keep up, wallet-busting price tags be damned. Yet, while she was racking up bills that could make a finance minister faint, Marie was also stepping into a world of economic turmoil. France was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy, thanks to a combination of costly wars, inefficient tax systems, and a court that spent like it was perpetually Black Friday. The American Revolution wasn't exactly a bargain either, with France shelling out over 1 billion livres to support the cause. It was the classic case of trying to impress your neighbors by buying the newest gadget on credit, only to realize your lights are about to be shut off. The irony. Despite her reputation for reckless spending, Marie's expenses were a drop in the Versailles-sized bucket of France's financial woes. The real deficit was rooted in systemic issues, an antiquated fiscal structure, crushing national debt, and the kind of economic management that would make a Ponzi scheme look airtight. But when you're the queen and your country is spiraling into financial ruin, perception often trumps reality. Marie's lavish lifestyle became the scapegoat, a symbol of royal excess in a time of growing unrest. Of course, it didn't help that Marie had a gift for rubbing salt into the social wounds of her day. She was often seen as aloof, removed from the struggles of the common folk. Retreating to the Petit Trianon, her private estate within the grounds of Versailles, she sought solace away from the oppressive formality of court life. There, she indulged in simpler pleasures, surrounded by a select few friends. She even dabbled in farming, dressing as a shepherdess in a pastoral fantasy that was about as close to reality as a theme park. But for the starving peasants, this perceived frivolity was akin to a slap in the face, a queen playing at simplicity while her subjects scraped by. Adding to the court's page-turner of dramas was the diamond necklace affair. This scandal was a convoluted tale of intrigue, deceit, and jewelry that would make any soap opera writer proud. Marie was falsely implicated in a scheme involving a 800-carat necklace worth about 2 million livres. The reality was that she had refused to buy the necklace, but a clever con artist used her name in a plot so tangled it could have been a Shakespearean tragedy. The fallout was immense, and though she was innocent, the damage to her reputation was done. It was a PR nightmare that would linger like a bad perfume. In those days, Marie was caught in a perfect storm of expectation and misperception. The French Revolution was brewing, and the atmosphere at Versailles was a powder keg waiting for a spark. Marie Antoinette, with her Austrian roots and extravagant tastes, was an easy target in the court of public opinion. As tensions rose, so did the voices of dissent, echoing through the halls of Versailles like a ghost of revolutions yet to come. Still, one has to wonder, would things have turned out differently if Marie was not the queen of style, but the queen of public relations? Her story is a poignant reminder that in the Game of Thrones, it's not just about what you do, but how it's perceived. And as the shadows lengthened over the gilded halls of Versailles, the stage was being set for a revolution that would change everything. But in the meantime, Marie Antoinette danced in those opulent ballrooms, oblivious to the storm gathering beyond the palace's glittering gates. As Marie Antoinette twirled through those opulent ballrooms, the storm clouds of revolution gathered with all the subtlety of a marching band. Outside the gilded gates of Versailles, whispers of change had grown into a deafening roar, and our queen was about to become the unwitting lead in a drama that would redefine a nation and her legacy. First, let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the empty breadbasket. France was in the throes of an economic crisis so deep it made the Great Depression look like a minor hiccup. The national debt had ballooned to over 4 billion livres, and the tax system was about as effective as a sieve at holding water. The rich were barely taxed, while the burden fell squarely on the already struggling peasants and middle class. Toss in a couple of bad harvests, and you have a recipe for disaster. In the midst of this financial chaos, Marie Antoinette's lavish lifestyle was the perfect fodder for public outrage. Her penchant for extravagant parties, expensive gowns, and the infamous Petit Trianon escapades painted a picture of a queen blissfully detached from the struggles of her people. To the starving masses, she wasn't just an out-of-touch monarch. She was the living embodiment of everything wrong with the aristocracy. Her transformation from fashion icon to national scapegoat was complete, and the guillotine of public opinion was already being sharpened. But let's add a layer of nuance here. Marie Antoinette's social gaffes weren't just about personal indulgence. They were a series of political blunders that sent her reputation into a tailspin. Take, for instance, her frequent interference in political appointments. She had a habit of championing friends and allies, sometimes at the expense of more qualified candidates. This wasn't just nepotism, this was PR suicide. Her involvement in the dismissal of ministers like Jacques Necker, a financial reformer popular with the people, cemented her image as a meddler and further alienated the populace. And then there was her relationship with the Habsburgs, her Austrian kin. With tensions rising between France and Austria, her ties to her homeland made her an ever more suspicious figure. To many, she was the enemy within the gates, a foreign queen with foreign interests, pulling the royal strings for her own ends. The political propaganda of the time was ruthless, portraying her as a manipulative seductress, an Austrian she-wolf ready to pounce on France's sovereignty. These caricatures found their way into the pamphlets and tabloids of the day, which spread faster than wildfire across a dry field. Satirical cartoons depicted her as everything from a lavish spendthrift to an insidious traitor. In the court of public opinion, where truth was often the first casualty, Marie Antoinette was guilty until proven otherwise. And with the revolutions further heating up like a forgotten kettle, otherwise wasn't on the menu. But hold on to your wigs, because the French Revolution wasn't just the result of some bad press and a few bread riots. This was an ideological earthquake, shaking the very foundations of French society. The Enlightenment had lit a fire in the minds of the populace, questioning the divine right of kings and advocating for equality, liberty, and fraternity. It was a time when philosophers were rock stars, and their ideas were the chart-toppers of the day. The old feudal system, with its rigid class structures, was being challenged by a new vision of society, one where merit, not birthright, dictated one's place. Marie Antoinette, however, seemed oblivious to these seismic shifts, or perhaps she simply underestimated them. Either way, her response was more let them eat macarons than a strategic pivot. Her failure to grasp the gravity of the situation, or at least to act decisively upon it, made her an easy target for revolutionary fervor. She was the perfect villain in a script that was riding itself faster than a court scribe on a caffeine high. And let's not forget the role of Louis Roman XVI in this tragic saga. The king was indecisive at best, paralyzed by the enormity of the problems facing his reign. His attempts at reform were too little, too late, and often met with fierce resistance from the very nobles he sought to placate. Together, Louis and Marie were a royal couple caught in a political riptide, dragged further into turmoil with each passing day. As the revolutionary tide rose, royal family became prisoners in their own palace. The Women's March on Versailles in October 1789 was a turning point, bringing the revolution straight to the doorstep of the monarchy. Thousands of women, armed and angry, demanded bread and reform, their cries echoing through the grand halls like the harbingers of change they were. Marie Antoinette's plea from the balcony, "If they want my head, let them come and take it," was both defiant and desperate, a testament to a queen facing the abyss. Marie Antoinette's downfall was as much a product of her own making as it was a consequence of the times. The revolution was an unstoppable force, and she, an immovable object, caught in its path. Her story is a cautionary tale of power's fragility, of how quickly the tides of fortune can turn. As the revolution gathered momentum, the queen who once dazzled with diamonds found herself stripped of everything: titles, power, and the illusion of safety within Versailles' walls. Her journey from adored dauphin to vilified monarch was complete, but the revolution's story was far from over. France was on the brink of transformation, and the fate of its monarchy hung in the balance. As for Marie Antoinette, her next chapters would be written not in the ballrooms of Versailles, but in the turbulent heart of revolutionary France. And as history has shown, this was a script with no room for encores. As the revolution's fervor swirled around her, Marie Antoinette found herself navigating treacherous waters, with danger lurking both outside and within the walls of her once magnificent palace. The monarchy's fall was now a question of when, not if, and the queen was left clutching at straws, or more aptly, at royal scepters. In a desperate attempt to save the royal family, Marie Antoinette and Louis Roman XVI hatched a plan that was bold but ill-fated: the infamous flight to Varennes. Think of it as a high-stakes road trip with significantly more at risk than your average family vacation. The plan was simple: escape Paris, rally loyalist troops, and retake control. But in reality, it was like trying to sneak out of a crowded theater during the climax of a movie without anyone noticing. On June 20, 1791, under the cover of night, the royal family set off in a lavish, custom-built coach. This was a getaway vehicle that screamed royalty on the run as loudly as a peacock in a library. It was slow, cumbersome, and about as subtle as a marching band in a meditation class. Their destination was Montmédy, a fortress town on the eastern frontier, some 200 miles away. But here's the kicker: they got lost. Yeah, the royal GPS was decidedly off, and their journey was more scenic detour than swift escape. The alarm was raised when the postmaster of Saint Manyhood, Jean-Baptiste Drouet, recognized the king from his likeness on currency. Talk about the perils of being a celebrity. Drouet quickly sounded the alarm, and the royal family's ill-fated journey was cut short at Varennes, just 30 miles from their destination. They were apprehended and unceremoniously escorted back to Paris, like celebrities being frog-marched off a red carpet. The flight to Varennes was a public relations disaster of epic proportions. It shattered any remaining illusions of the monarchy's inviolability and painted the royal family as traitors attempting to abandon their nation in its hour of need. Louis Roman XVI credibility, already as shaky as a house of cards in a hurricane, crumbled entirely. For Marie Antoinette, the escape attempt confirmed every suspicion about her Austrian loyalties. To the revolutionaries, the monarchy's flight was a betrayal of the highest order, akin to the captain abandoning a sinking ship, except this ship was a nation, and the passengers were its people. Back in Paris, the atmosphere was charged with revolutionary zeal, and the royal family's arrest only fueled the fire. The National Assembly, which had been cautiously navigating the choppy waters of constitutional monarchy, was pushed further towards radical measures. The king and queen were now prisoners of the revolution, their every move scrutinized, and their every word weighed for sedition. In the months following their return, the royal family lived under virtual house arrest in the Tuileries Palace. The once grandiose halls now echoed with the tension of impending doom. Marie Antoinette, ever the stalwart, clung to the hope of foreign intervention. She corresponded secretly with her Austrian relatives, urging them to mount a rescue operation. But the political chessboard was shifting too quickly, and her pleas fell on deaf ears, like whispers in a storm. The situation reached a boiling point in August 1792, when the revolutionary sans-culottes stormed the Tuileries Palace. This was no mere protest. This was an insurrection, a full-blown overthrow of royal authority. The king and queen sought refuge in the Legislative Assembly, but their fate was sealed. Louis Roman XVI was dethroned, and the monarchy was officially abolished. The royal family was imprisoned in the Temple, a medieval fortress that had been repurposed as a revolutionary prison. From that moment, Marie Antoinette's world shrank to the cold, stone walls of her cell. Gone were the opulent rooms of Versailles, replaced by the harsh reality of confinement. Her children were separated from her, a cruel blow for a mother who had already lost so much. Yet, in the face of adversity, Marie Antoinette displayed a resilience that belied her reputation as a frivolous monarch. She wrote letters to her surviving allies, planned escape attempts, and maintained a dignified composure despite the mounting pressure. In December 1792, Louis Roman XVI was brought before the National Convention to stand trial. The charges were grave: conspiracy against the state, treason, and undermining the revolution. The trial was more a foregone conclusion than a fair hearing, with revolutionary fervor dictating the outcome. On January 21, 1793, Louis was executed by guillotine, his death marking the definitive end of the Bourbon monarchy. For Marie Antoinette, her husband's execution was a devastating blow, yet her own ordeal was just beginning. The revolutionaries, emboldened by their victory over the king, turned their attention to the queen. She was transferred to the conciergerie, a grim prison known as the antechamber to the guillotine. Her trial was set for October 1793, and the charges leveled against her were a mix of fact and fiction, a tapestry of real grievances and salacious rumors. Her trial was less about justice and more about spectacle, a revolutionary show trial designed to cement her guilt in the public eye. The accusations ranged from fiscal irresponsibility to high treason, and even the scandalous charge of incest with her son, a claim so outrageous it drew gasps from the courtroom. Marie Antoinette, ever composed, denied the charges with a dignity that belied her dire situation. But the verdict was a foregone conclusion: guilty. On October 16, 1793, Marie Antoinette was led to the guillotine, her once elaborate coiffure shorn to a simple crop. Her execution was a somber affair, witnessed by thousands who had once cheered her as queen. She faced her end with a stoic grace, reportedly apologizing to her executioner for stepping on his foot, a final gesture of politeness in a world that had shown her little. As the guillotine fell, so too did the curtain on Marie Antoinette's tumultuous life. Her death was the tragic culmination of a story steeped in opulence and upheaval, a stark reminder of the fragility of power and the fickle nature of public opinion. The queen who had once dazzled with diamonds met her end beneath the blade, her legacy forever entwined with the revolution that reshaped France. Yet, as the dust settled on the revolution's bloody stage, questions lingered. Was Marie Antoinette a victim of circumstance, caught in the crosshairs of history's relentless march? Or was she the architect of her own downfall, blinded by privilege to the changing world around her? These questions would echo through the corridors of history, sparking debate and reflection for generations to come. But the revolution's story was far from over. France stood on the brink of a new era, its future uncertain, its path uncharted. As Marie Antoinette's chapter closed, the nation she had once ruled faced a new dawn, one that would test the very ideals for which the revolution had been fought. And as history has shown, the road ahead was anything but smooth, with challenges and triumphs yet to unfold. As France teetered on the precipice of a new era, the story of Marie Antoinette lingered like a shadow, casting a long and complex legacy over the freshly laid foundations of a nation reborn. Her execution may have been the final act in her tumultuous life, but in many ways it was just the beginning of her enduring narrative, a tale that continues to captivate and confound, blending myth with reality in the way only history can. Marie Antoinette's demise was not just a personal tragedy, but a public spectacle, one that encapsulated the volatile mood of revolutionary France. The queen, who had once been the epitome of opulence and excess, was reduced to a figurehead of vilification, her fate sealed by the very forces she had failed to comprehend. In the minds of many, she was the living embodiment of a decadent ancient regime that had overstayed its welcome, a cautionary tale of what happens when privilege turns a blind eye to the rumblings of discontent. But to reduce her story to mere caricature would be to miss the nuanced reality of her life and legacy. For all her faults, and there were many, Marie Antoinette was also a woman navigating the treacherous waters of power, often alone and frequently misunderstood. Her extravagance, while undeniable, was a product of the world she inherited, a world where appearances mattered as much as substance, and where the line between public duty and personal desire was often blurred. On the powdered wigs and lavish soirees, there was a human being grappling with the immense weight of expectation. She was a mother, a wife, and a queen, each role demanding more than she was perhaps prepared to give. Her story is not just one of downfall, but of resilience, of a woman who, despite her many missteps, faced her end with a dignity that speaks to the complexity of her character. Her legacy, however, is a mixed bag. On the one hand, she remains a symbol of excess, her name forever linked with the excesses of the French monarchy. But on the other, she has become a figure of fascination and reinterpretation, her life dissected and reassembled through the lenses of art, literature, and popular culture. From Sofia Coppola's stylized film to countless biographies, Marie Antoinette has been resurrected time and again, her image reshaped to fit the narratives of the day. Yet the myths that surround her, those tantalizing tales of let them eat cake and diamond necklaces, persist, not because they are true, but because they are compelling. They offer a simple explanation for complex events, a neat villain for a messy revolution. But as with all historical figures, the reality is far more intricate, a tapestry of contradictions and complexities that defy easy categorization. Economically speaking, Marie's lavish spending was but a drop in the ocean of France's financial woes. The state was already drowning in debt by the time she arrived on the scene, burdened by the costs of war and a tax system that was as outdated as it was inefficient. Yet, she became the face of fiscal folly, a convenient scapegoat in a nation searching for someone to blame. Politically, her Austrian roots and perceived meddling in state affairs only compounded her problems. She was seen as an outsider, a foreign queen with foreign interests, and in the crucible of revolution, such suspicions were enough to seal her fate. Her attempts to influence policy, often driven by personal alliances rather than political acumen, did little to endear her to the French public. In the end, she was caught in a web of her own making, a victim of both circumstance and her own misjudgments. In the broader scope of history, Marie Antoinette's life serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of power and the capriciousness of public opinion. Her story is one of transformation, both personal and national, a testament to the ever-shifting sands of time and the relentless march of change. Her legacy, much like her life, is a study in contrasts, a blend of grandeur and tragedy, of myth and reality, a reflection of the complexities of the human condition. As for France, the nation she left behind was on the brink of a new dawn. The revolution had swept away the old order, but the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty. The ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, so passionately championed by the revolutionaries, will be tested in the fires of a new era. The guillotine may have claimed the monarchy, but it could not claim the spirit of a people determined to forge a new future. In the end, Marie Antoinette's story is not just about a queen who lost her head, but about the enduring power of narrative, of how history is both remembered and retold. Her life, much like the revolution itself, is a testament to the complexities of the past and the ways in which we continue to grapple with its legacy. As we reflect on her story, we are reminded that history is not just a collection of dates and events, but a tapestry of human experiences, woven together in a way that continues to shape our understanding of the world. And so, as the curtain falls on this chapter of history, we are left with a story that is both timeless and timely, a reminder that in the grand theatre of human events, the actors may change, but the themes remain ever relevant. Marie Antoinette may have exited the stage, but her legacy endures, a testament to the complexities of power, privilege, and the human spirit. The rooster you didn't ask for is your alarm clock, and it doesn't come with a snooze button. You're in Knossos, the beating heart of the Minoan civilization, where every morning begins with the symphony of clattering pottery, bleeding goats, and the faint chants of merchants setting up shop. Welcome to the Bronze Age, where the air is as thick with history as it is with the smell of olive oil and fresh bread. Your digs, not too shabby. You roll out of your straw-stuffed mattress onto the cool stone floor of your modest abode, nestled within the labyrinthine streets of this sprawling city. Let's not sugarcoat it. These aren't the sprawling villas of the Minoan elite, but your place isn't a hole in the ground either. You're a craftsman, a cog in the well-oiled machine that is the Minoan economy, and your home sits somewhere in the middle of the social ladder, comfortably above peasants, but a climb below the aristocrats. As you pull on your linen tunic, consider the layout of Knossos. This isn't some haphazard cluster of huts. It's a meticulously planned urban center. The palatial complex, sprawling over 20,000 square meters, looms in the not-so-far distance. It's the epicenter of Minoan life, with its multi-storied buildings, winding corridors, and frescoed walls. Archaeologists claim it housed over 300 rooms. Glad you're not in charge of cleaning that up. The geography here is no accident. Crete is like the Switzerland of the Bronze Age Mediterranean, strategically stuck right in the middle of things. It's a trade hub with ships constantly coming and going, laden with goods from Egypt, the Near East, and mainland Greece. You, my industrious friend, are part of this buzzing economic engine. Your craft, whether it's pottery, metalwork, or textiles, feeds the demand for Minoan goods far and wide. But wait, you might think, where do I fit into this grand tapestry? You, as a craftsman, are crucial. You aren't top of the heap, but you're also not the bottom rung. The social hierarchy is clear. The king, or wanax, sits at the top, surrounded by a cohort of priests, scribes, and bureaucrats. Think of them as the ancient version of middle management. Below them, the merchants and craftsmen like you keep the wheels of trade and production turning, and at the base are the farmers and laborers. The Minoan economy is a well-oiled machine, with a barter system that's as complex as it is efficient. Forget about coins or paper money. Those won't become a thing for hundreds of years. Here, you trade goods for goods, pottery for grain, textiles for olive oil. If you're good at what you do, your wares might even end up on one of those ships bound for distant lands, spreading the fame of Minoan craftsmanship far beyond the shores of Crete. But let's not get too romantic. The reality is you work hard, 6 days a week hard. The sun barely peeks over the horizon before you're out and about, shaping clay or hammering bronze. Your skills are prized, but the work is relentless, and there's always the risk of droughts, earthquakes, or invasions upsetting the apple cart. The Minoan civilization might seem like a utopia, but Mother Nature and neighboring foes don't play by the same rules. As you step out into the bustling streets, the city awakens around you. Women in their iconic tiered skirts bustle to the communal wells. Children chase each other in games that probably break at least 3 modern safety regulations, and merchants shout their wares in a cacophony of trade talk. You navigate through this daily dance, headed towards your workshop while taking in the rich tapestry that is Knossos. Your workshop is a hive of activity, a small but vital part of the Minoan economy. This isn't just where you work, it's where innovation happens. The Minoans are known for their advanced techniques, from the intricate designs on their pottery to the sophisticated metalwork. You might be shaping the very vessels that will end up in the homes of the well-to-do or adorning the halls of palaces. Take a moment to appreciate the tools of your trade. The potter's wheel, a relatively recent innovation, allows you to craft vessels with precision and speed. If you're into metals, you're using techniques that will be the envy of other civilizations for centuries. And let's not forget the dyes extracted from local plants and minerals, turning simple textiles into vibrant canvases of color. In this world, your reputation as a craftsman is your currency. The quality of your work determines your standing in the community, and it can open doors or shut them. Produce a masterpiece, and you could find yourself rubbing shoulders with the merchant class, exchanging goods for luxury items, and maybe even securing a modest fortune. Produce shoddy work, and well, you might find the doors of opportunity closing faster than you can say, linear B. But let's press pause on the existential dread for a moment. The Minoans also know how to enjoy life. The city is alive with festivals and religious ceremonies. The grand processions and bull-leaping events are the stuff of legend. And while you might not have a front-row seat to these spectacles, the communal celebrations are a chance to let loose and admire the artistry and athleticism that the Minoans hold dear. As the sun climbs higher, painting the city in hues of gold, you find yourself part of a civilization that, while not without its challenges, is a beacon of cultural and economic vitality. You're not just a craftsman, you're a vital thread in the rich tapestry of Knossos, a city that stands as a testament to human ingenuity and resilience. And as you dive into the day's work, remember, in the grand scheme of history, you've got a pretty sweet gig. And so, as the sun casts its golden glow over Knossos, you're knee-deep in the nitty-gritty of your craft, where the magic really happens. Forget the romantic notion of the lone genius artist toiling away in solitude. This is a team sport. Your workspace is a cacophony of activity, a symphony of clanging tools, and the rhythmic hum of busy hands. It's here that the raw materials of your trade, clay, metals, textiles, begin their transformation from mundane to magnificent. Let's talk about the materials of your trade. Your clay comes from the rich Cretan soil, the same earth that nourishes the olive trees and vines. But it's not just any old dirt. Oh no, this clay has attitude. It's got the perfect balance of grit and pliability, making it ideal for crafting those iconic Minoan pots and amphorae. You can almost hear the ancestors whispering their approval as you shape it into something that will outlast generations. But don't get too attached. Once it's fired, it's off to the market, or loaded onto a ship, bound for places with names you can barely pronounce. Now, if you're a metal worker, your day involves an entirely different kind of alchemy. You're dealing with copper and tin, the dynamic duo of the Bronze Age. But hold your horses, these metals don't just grow on trees. Copper is mined locally from places like Cyprus, while tin, that's a whole different ballgame. Tin is the elusive ingredient, more precious than a good sandal on a rainy day. It's sourced from places as far-flung as Afghanistan or Cornwall. Yes, you heard that right. Cornwall, which means your tin has seen more of the world than most people ever will. Here's where the plot thickens. Trade. This is your lifeline, the beating heart of the Minoan economy. Those ships you see darting the horizon are more than just floating piles of goods. They are the conduits of cultural exchange. They bring in not just materials, but ideas, styles, and yes, even gossip from distant lands. Trade is the thread that ties the entire Mediterranean together, and you, my industrious friend, are one of its weavers. The significance of your craft extends far beyond the marketplace. It seeps into the very fabric of Minoan culture and religion. Your creations might end up in the grand ceremonial halls of the palaces, like the one at Knossos, where they play starring roles in religious rituals. Picture this: your painstakingly crafted vessels holding libations that are poured out in honor of deities like the enigmatic snake goddess. Minoan religion is as colorful and intricate as their frescoes, with gods and goddesses that demand nothing less than the finest craftsmanship. And speaking of palaces, let's not forget their grandeur. They aren't just royal residences. They are the beating heart of Minoan civilization, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition. Your work contributes to this splendor, reflecting the power and sophistication of a society that many historians argue was ahead of its time. The palaces are adorned with frescoes, wooden columns painted in vivid reds and blacks, and intricate stonework, all of which require the skilled hands of craftsmen like you. Of course, it's not all sunshine and frescoes. The Minoan palaces, as impressive as they are, didn't build themselves. They are the result of labor, lots of it. And while the finished product might look like it was plucked from the dreams of an ancient architect, the reality is that it's the result of sweat, blisters, and the occasional curse word muttered under the breath. But the end result, it's worth it. These aren't just buildings. They're the embodiment of Minoan might and majesty. Your role in all of this, it's crucial. You're not just a cog in the machine. You're crafting the very components that allow that machine to run. Each part, each tool, each piece of metalwork is a testament to the skill and dedication of the Minoan craftsman. It's a legacy that endures, echoing through time like the rhythmic beat of the sea against the Cretan shore. So next time you find yourself elbow-deep in clay or squinting through the smoke of the forge, remember this: you're not just shaping materials, you're shaping history. And while the palaces of Knossos might capture the headlines, it's the quiet, unassuming work of craftsmen like you that truly holds the civilization together. As the day winds down and the shadows grow long, take a moment to appreciate the role you play in this grand tapestry. Because at the end of the day, you're not just creating objects, you're creating a legacy. As the sun dips lower, casting a warm, golden glow over Knossos, you head towards the thrum of activity that is the marketplace. It's a sensory overload of shouting merchants, clinking pottery, and the unmistakable aroma of grilled fish mingling with the earthy scent of herbs. This is where the action happens, the beating heart of the Minoan economy. Now, let's talk business. Forget coins jingling in pockets. You're in a world where your goods are your currency. Welcome to the barter system, where negotiating skills and a keen eye for value are as important as the goods themselves. Got a surplus of your exquisitely crafted amphorae? Great. You might trade them for a year's supply of grain, or, if you're lucky, a rare imported luxury like Egyptian papyrus. But don't get too hasty. This ain't a flea market. Bartering here is a sophisticated dance, and knowing the worth of your wares is your ticket to success. Of course, not everything is as straightforward as trading parts for grain. The Minoans are masters of international trade, and your life as a craftsman is shaped by the ebb and flow of goods from across the seas. Ships docked at Cretan ports come bearing gifts, or rather, high-demand goods, from places as far-flung as Egypt and the Near East. It's a veritable conga line of cultural exchange, with Minoan pottery found in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs and Babylonian trinkets nestled in Cretan homes. The marketplace is where you feel the pulse of this thriving trade network. It's not just about exchanging goods, it's about creating connections. The talk of the agora, or marketplace, is as much about the latest shipment of Mycenaean olive oil as it is about who's in line to marry the merchant's daughter. In this lively bazaar, the line between social interaction and economic transaction is blurrier than the frescoes on a bad restoration day. But don't mistake this bustling scene for an economic free-for-all. There are pressures here, invisible yet palpable. The Minoan economy, while robust, isn't immune to the whims of fate. Take, for instance, the delicate balance of supply and demand. A shipwreck here, a bad harvest there, and suddenly the price of your clay parts can fluctuate more wildly than Minoan fashion trends. And then there's the constant spectre of natural disasters, earthquakes, anyone, ready to throw a wrench in the best-laid plans. Yet, in this precarious dance of prosperity and peril, opportunities abound. The ambitious craftsman who plays his cards right might find himself ascending the social ladder, produce a piece that catches the eye of a wealthy merchant or, better yet, a palace official, and you could secure patronage that turns your modest workshop into a booming enterprise. It's the Bronze Age version of going viral, minus the cat videos. Let's linger on the international angle a bit longer, because it's a game changer. The Minoans were savvy operators, leveraging their strategic position in the Mediterranean to become the ancient world's shipping magnates. They traded olive oil, wine, and pottery, not just for survival, but for status. And status, my friend, is the currency that never devalues. The impact of this trade is profound. It shapes not only the economy, but the very fabric of Minoan society. Exotic materials and foreign ideas trickle in, influencing everything from art to architecture. Egyptian motifs start appearing in local crafts, and Cretan artisans begin incorporating Near Eastern techniques into their work. This isn't just trade, it's cultural symbiosis, a mutual exchange that enriches both sides. But let's not romanticize it entirely. This is still the ancient world, where the power dynamics are as intricate as a Minoan fresco. The palatial elites are the kingpins, controlling the flow of goods, and by extension, the fortunes of folks like you. They're the ones who negotiate with foreign powers, ensuring that the ships keep sailing and the goods keep coming. It's a top-down system, and while there's room for mobility, the ladder is slippery. As you navigate this complex web of commerce and culture, consider the economic pressures that influence your livelihood. The Minoans are nothing if not resourceful, but their dependence on trade makes them vulnerable to external shocks. A disruption in trade routes, be it due to piracy or political instability in a far-off land, can send ripples through the marketplace, affecting everything from the price of grain to the availability of tin. Yet therein lies the opportunity. The Minoans are masters at turning adversity into advantage. When the going gets tough, the tough get trading. New trade routes are explored, alternative goods are bartered, and innovation becomes the name of the game. It's a testament to human resilience, a reminder that in the face of uncertainty, the spirit of enterprise prevails. As you wrap up your day in the bustling agora, take stock of your place in this grand economic tapestry. You're not just a maker of goods, you're a participant in a dynamic system that connects Crete to the farthest reaches of the known world. You're part of a civilization that thrives on exchange, a society that understands the value of both tangible and intangible goods. And while the marketplace might seem like chaos incarnate, remember, it's a chaos with a purpose, a dance of supply and demand that keeps the wheels of Minoan prosperity turning. So as the sun sets over Knossos and the marketplace begins to quiet, reflect on the day's transactions, the deals struck, and the goods exchanged. You're not just crafting objects, you're crafting relationships, weaving a web of connections that spans continents. In the grand scheme of history, you're not just a craftsman. You're a linchpin in the complex machinery of Minoan trade, a vital cog in an economy that, despite its challenges, stands as a beacon of innovation and resilience. And with that, as the last light fades, you head home, ready to do it all again tomorrow. Because in the world of Minoan trade, the only constant is change, and the only certainty is opportunity. As you trudge back to your abode, the sun dipping below the horizon like a coin into the sea, let's dive into the myths that swirl around this island like the ever-present Mediterranean breeze. Ah, the Minoans, master craftsmen, savvy traders, and if legends are to be believed, the hosts of the world's first Minotaur petting zoo. But before we get swept up in the romance, let's lace up our sandals and take a closer look. You've probably heard the tale. King Minos, a labyrinth, and a beast with the taste for Athenian teenagers. The Minotaur myth is the kind of story that could sell out amphitheaters faster than a modern-day rock concert. But here's the catch. While these stories add a mythical sheen, they also fog up the archaeological glasses we need to see the real Minoan civilization. It's like trying to evaluate a historical figure based on a Hollywood biopic. Entertaining, sure, but not exactly accurate. The labyrinth, in all its mythical glory, is often linked to the Grand Palace at Knossos. With its twisting corridors and sprawling expanse, You can see why ancient storytellers got creative. But remember, this wasn't a monster's den. It was a political and economic nerve center. Sir Arthur Evans, the archaeologist who first unearthed Knossos in the early 20th century, might have let his imagination run a little wild, seeing minotaurs where there were probably just bureaucrats in funny hats. And the minotaur itself, let's not get carried away. While the image of a half-man, half-bull creature is undeniably compelling, it's more likely a metaphor for Minoan rituals. Bulls were significant in Minoan culture, often depicted in art, and possibly linked to religious ceremonies. Bull leaping, a kind of ancient gymnastics meets rodeo, was a real thing. Men and women would grab the horns of a charging bull and flip over its back. Talk about extreme sports. But this wasn't about appeasing a monster. It was likely a display of skill and dexterity, a testament to the Minoans' reverence for both athleticism and spectacle. Now, let's address another myth, the idea of the Minoans as peaceful tree-huggers in tiered skirts. Sure, their society seems to have been less warlike than their contemporaries. Looking at you, Mycenaeans, but a utopia, not so fast. The absence of fortifications at places like Knossos has led some to believe the Minoans were pacifists, but archaeological evidence suggests they weren't strangers to conflict. Weapons have been found, and let's not forget the linear tablets hinting at a society that was as politically complex as it was culturally rich. As a craftsman, your life isn't exactly the stuff of legends, but it's no less fascinating. You're part of a society that values skill and innovation. The economic engine might be oiled by trade, but it runs on the sweat of people like you. 6 days a week, you're shaping, molding, and creating, living in a world where craftsmanship is both art and survival. And while you're busy perfecting your craft, the upper echelons of society, the Wanax and his cronies, are busy perfecting the art of governance, keeping the wheels of Minoan civilization turning smoothly. Speaking of governance, let's not gloss over the socio-political dynamics at play. The Minoans were ruled by a centralized authority, likely centered around the palatial complexes. These weren't just architectural marvels, they were administrative hubs. Picture them as the ancient equivalent of corporate headquarters, complete with storerooms, workshops, and maybe even a break room with a decent view of the Aegean. Your role, while not in the plush confines of the palace, is just as crucial. The goods you produce, whether they are amphorae destined for foreign shores or textiles to adorn Cretan homes, are the lifeblood of this society. But it's not all sunny skies and sea breezes. The labor conditions can be grueling, with the relentless pace set by the demands of trade and the expectations of quality. You're expected to deliver, and there's little room for slacking off. Societal expectations weigh heavily, too. As a craftsman, your reputation is everything. It determines your standing in the community and dictates your economic success. Produce shoddy work, and you risk your social and economic status. The pressure is on, and while there's room for advancement, the path isn't always clear or straightforward. So, as the myths and legends swirl like the dust in the streets of Knossos, remember that the reality of Minoan life is a tapestry of hard work, ambition, and cultural exchange. You're not just a cog in a machine. You're part of a civilization that, despite its mythical trappings, was very much grounded in the practicalities of trade, craftsmanship, and governance. And as you settle in for the night, the stars twinkling overhead like scattered gemstones, remember this. In the grand myth of history, your story is just as compelling as any Minotaur's. You're part of a legacy that, while not as fantastical as the legends suggest, every bit as awe-inspiring in its ingenuity and resilience. But don't get too comfortable. There's more to explore, and tomorrow brings another day in the life of a Minoan craftsman. Another chance to shape history, one clay part at a time. Now, as you sit beneath the starry Cretan sky, let's pivot to the big picture, the grand finale of the Minoan story. Our tale isn't just a day in the life, but a decades-long saga with a climactic ending. So, what happened to the Minoans, those ancient rock stars of the Mediterranean world? Why did their civilization, with its labyrinthine palaces and artistic flair, eventually fade into the annals of history? Spoiler alert, it's not as simple as a single catastrophic event. First, let's dispel the Hollywood-style collapse myth. The Minoan civilization didn't disappear overnight in a dramatic explosion of ash and fire, though the volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE played a starring role. This eruption was a natural disaster of epic proportions, one that sent shockwaves, literally and metaphorically, across the Aegean. The fallout included tsunamis that battered Crete's shores and volcanic ash that could have disrupted agriculture. But was it the smoking gun for the Minoan decline? Not quite. The Minoans were resilient, bouncing back and continuing their cultural and economic activities for several more centuries. However, the eruption was just one act in a multi-part drama. Enter stage left, the Mycenaeans. These mainland Greeks were more than just neighbors. They were opportunistic power players. By the mid-15th century BCE, they began to exert influence over Crete, eventually taking over the administrative reins. The evidence: linear B tablets found at Knossos, bearing the script of the Mycenaeans. It seems our Minoan friends were nudged aside, their culture gradually assimilated into the Mycenaean way of life. The palatial centers, once bustling hubs of Minoan creativity and trade, started to bear Mycenaean architectural and cultural influences. Who were these Mycenaeans, you ask? Think of them as the ancient world's version of corporate raiders. They admired the Minoans' artistic sophistication, but brought their own penchant for fortifications and militaristic prowess to the table. While the Minoans preferred open, unfortified palaces, the Mycenaeans built citadels, massive, fortified structures that screamed, "We're here to stay, and good luck getting past these walls." So, was it all doom and gloom for the Minoans? Not entirely. Their legacy endured, woven into the fabric of the Mycenaean civilization. Minoan art and architecture influenced Mycenaean styles, and their innovations in trade and craftsmanship continued to reverberate throughout the ancient world. The Mycenaeans might have taken the stage, but they were performing with borrowed scripts, props, and costumes. Fast forward a few centuries, and the Minoan influence continued to ripple outward. The Greeks, heirs to the Mycenaean world, drew inspiration from Minoan art, especially in pottery and frescoes. The iconic Minoan motifs, spirals, marine life, and intricate patterns, found new life in Greek art. Even the famed Greek myths, like the legend of the Minotaur, kept the memory of Minoan Crete alive, albeit wrapped in layers of myth and imagination. But let's not gloss over the fact that the Minoans were more than just artistic trailblazers. They were pioneers in urban planning and architecture, with their palatial complexes setting a benchmark for future civilizations. The plumbing systems of Knossos, with their clay pipes and elaborate drainage, were marvels of engineering, rivaling those of later Roman cities. And let's give a nod to that revolutionary invention, the potter's wheel, which transformed craftsmanship and set the stage for mass production and trade. In the grand tapestry of history, the Minoans represent a civilization that was both a product of its time and a harbinger of future innovations. Their decline wasn't the end, but a transformation, a blending of cultures that paved the way for the classical world. The Minoans walked so the Greeks could run, if you will. So, as you ponder the legacy of Minoan craftsmanship, remember that history is rarely a straight line. It's a complex dance of continuity and change, of cultures rising, influencing, and sometimes fading, only to leave a lasting imprint. The Minoans might have vanished from the stage, but their influence endures, a testament to their ingenuity, artistry, and resilience. As you tuck into bed, the cool Mediterranean breeze ruffling your hair, take a moment to reflect on your place in this vast historical narrative. You're not just a craftsman in Knossos, you're a guardian of a legacy that spans centuries. The parts you shape, the vessels you mold, are echoes of a civilization that continues to inspire and intrigue. And with that, let the knowledge of the Minoans' enduring legacy lull you to sleep, secure in the understanding that while civilizations may rise and fall, the art and culture they leave behind remain timeless. After all, in the grand scheme of history, it's the echoes of the past that resonate the loudest. You wake up to the sound of waves crashing against the hull, the salty air filling your lungs like the world's briniest alarm clock. Welcome to life as a pirate during the golden age of piracy, when the Caribbean was less a vacation destination and more of a floating marketplace for stolen goods. You're not lounging on a beach with a coconut drink. You've got a full day of pillaging and plundering ahead, assuming the rum hasn't run out. First things first, you crawl out of your hammock, assuming you didn't have to share it with stowaways like rats or the occasional fellow pirate who couldn't find their own. Hygiene isn't exactly a top priority, but you splash some seawater on your face to wake up. Breakfast is sparse. A hardtack biscuit that could double as a weapon in a pinch, and maybe some salted pork if you're lucky. You're not dining at the Ritz, but hey, calories are calories, right? So why are you here, on this creaky ship with questionable company? Let's talk economics. Europe in the late 17th and early 18th centuries was not exactly a land of opportunity, unless you were a noble or had a knack for not starving. The working class had limited avenues to wealth, and the idea of legally acquiring Spanish gold was as likely as finding an honest politician. The Spanish treasure fleets, with their galleons loaded to the brim with New World goodies, gold, silver, spices, were the ultimate payday for anyone daring enough to try and snatch them. For many, the life of a pirate was less about the love of adventure and more about hard choices driven by even harder times. Unemployment was high, and the sea promised something that the land couldn't, a shot at wealth, however slim. If you could capture just one of those treasure-laden Spanish ships, you'd be set for life, or until your next bout of scurvy, whichever came first. Now, let's address the elephant, or perhaps the parrot, in the room, pirate democracy. Romanticized tales would have you believe that pirates were the original socialists, running their ships like floating communes. To a degree, they did practice a form of democracy, but it wasn't some utopian paradise. Decisions were made by vote, sure, but it was less about egalitarian principles and more about keeping mutiny at bay. The captain's orders weren't law. They were more like strongly worded suggestions. If the crew didn't like the way things were going, they had the power to replace the captain, sometimes with extreme prejudice. And yes, even the guy who only joined because he heard there'd be rum had a say. But don't get carried away with visions of a pirate United Nations. These votes often came down to pragmatic concerns. Who was best at steering the ship away from naval patrols? Who could best negotiate or intimidate other ships into surrendering without a fight? And who had the best stash of tobacco for those long nights at sea? This was a world where everyone had a voice, but not everyone had equal weight. Skills mattered. The best gunners, the sharpest navigators, and the toughest fighters naturally held more sway. And let's not forget the allure of the infamous pirate code. These weren't just rules, they were survival guides. No fighting on board, no gambling debts left unpaid, and definitely no bringing women or boys on board, because nothing complicates a pirate's life like extra drama. So, as you find your sea legs and prepare for the day's endeavors, take a moment to appreciate the stark reality behind the romantic myths. The pirate life may have its adventurous appeal, living free on the open sea, the possibility of untold riches, but it was also a hard, dangerous existence. It was a life of constant risk, where today's success could be tomorrow's downfall. But here you are, one of a band of misfits, outcasts, and fortune-seekers, ready to face whatever the ocean throws at you. And as the sun rises higher, you can almost hear the unspoken question hanging in the salty air. What will today bring? As the sun climbs higher in the sky, casting its relentless glare over the churning sea, you quickly learn that surviving a day on board a pirate ship is less about bravado and more about a finely tuned cocktail of speed, cunning, and a dash of luck. Speed, because outrunning the more heavily armed Navy ships is often your best bet. Cunning, because outsmarting your adversaries can save you from a fight that risks everything. And luck, well, because sometimes the sea just doesn't play fair. Let's talk ships. Forget the image of a hulking, cannon-bristling galleon. What you really need is something that moves like a cat on a hot tin roof. Enter the sloop, the pirate's ship of choice. Sleek, fast, and agile, a sloop could be crewed by as few as 75 men, compared to the 200 needed to operate a Spanish galleon. With its shallow draft, it could slip into coastal inlets and shallow waters where larger ships dared not venture. The sloop was the speedboat of its time, the Ferrari of the seas, minus the leather seats and Bluetooth. Armament was another area where pirates had to be shrewd. While the British Navy might boast rows upon rows of massive cannons, pirates had to be more resourceful. They often outfitted their ships with smaller, lighter cannons that could be moved quickly and re-aimed during a chase. The idea was to disable an enemy's ship's sails or rudder, effectively hobbling it, rather than sinking it outright. After all, a ship at the bottom of the ocean isn't much use to anyone. And let's not forget the grappling hooks, essential gear for any self-respecting pirate looking to board a vessel without an invitation. Now, speaking of invitations, let's address the buried treasure trove. Ah, the romantic vision of pirates burying chests full of gold and jewels on deserted islands. Here's the real deal. You're more likely to find a pirate with a map to the nearest tavern than to a hidden hoard of treasure. Sure, there were a few cases of loot being stashed away, but for the most part, pirates were practical. They spent their plunder as fast as they acquired it. The idea of saving for a rainy day was as foreign as the notion of dental hygiene. The real treasures, then, were often more mundane. Sugar, spices, silk, and tobacco were hot commodities, easily traded and quickly spent. And let's not overlook alcohol, the social lubricant of the high seas. Rum was the drink of choice, often mixed with water to create grog, a beverage that served the dual purpose of keeping the crew hydrated and somewhat oblivious to the daily grind. It might not have been the nectar of the gods, but when you're stuck on a ship surrounded by endless blue, it was close enough. Which brings us to provisions. If you think your last road trip snacks were uninspired, wait until you hear about hardtack. This rock-hard biscuit was a staple on pirate ships, not because it was delicious, but because it was practically indestructible. Made from flour, water, and salt, it could last for months, even years, without spoiling. The downside, it was like biting into a piece of granite. You'd often have to soak it in water or rum just to make it edible, or at least less likely to break a tooth. But if you think the culinary experience stops there, consider the salted meat. Preserved with enough salt to make a slug shrivel, it was the protein source that kept pirates from succumbing to the sea's relentless hunger. It wasn't gourmet, but it was hearty, and when paired with the occasional fresh catch from the sea, it was enough to keep scurvy at bay. Barely. So, as you navigate the afternoon, eyes peeled for sails on the horizon, remember that life on a pirate ship is a delicate dance of survival. You're not just battling the elements and enemy ships. You're constantly outsmarting the limitations of your own resources. It's a world where every decision is a gamble, every encounter a test of wits and willpower. And as the sun casts long shadows across the deck, you can't help but wonder what tales of daring and desperation will be woven into the fabric of the day. As the sun dips towards the horizon, painting the sky with hues even a pirate would pause to admire, life aboard the ship takes on a different rhythm. Evening's approach isn't just a time to rest or count the loot, assuming you've had a good day of pillaging. It's when the social dynamics of the ship come alive, revealing a microcosm of society that's more inclusive than you might expect. Forget the stereotype of a ship full of bloodthirsty rogues. This was a floating melting pot of outcasts, each with a story as colorful as a parrot's plumage. In the world of piracy, it didn't matter where you came from as much as where you were headed. Former slaves found a new kind of freedom among these renegades of the sea. Take Black Caesar, for example, a legendary figure who was said to have escaped slavery and turned pirate, eventually commanding his own crew. Outlaws, misfits, and even some disgraced nobles also found their place aboard. It was less about who you were and more about what you could do. Could you handle a sword, navigate by the stars, patch a sail with nothing more than spit and determination? If so, welcome aboard. Pirate ships were ahead of their time in terms of inclusivity. Now, don't get it twisted. This wasn't a utopian society devoid of prejudice. Racism and sexism were still very much afloat, but compared to the rigid social hierarchies on land, pirate life was a meritocracy of necessity. When survival is the name of the game, you can't afford to overlook a skilled hand because of their skin color or background. Your ability to contribute to the crew's success was the ultimate currency. Speaking of currency, let's address the myth of the iron-fisted pirate captain ruling with a peg-legged boot on the throat of his crew. The reality was often more democratic, albeit in a cutthroat sort of way. Captains like Bartholomew Roberts and Henry Morgan were chosen not just for their swashbuckling prowess, but for their charisma and competence. A captain needed the respect of his crew, not just their fear. After all, in an environment where mutiny was just a bad decision away, power was more about persuasion than punishment. Enter the pirate code, a set of rules that would surprise anyone who thinks pirates were all chaos and carnage. This wasn't some dusty tome of maritime law. It was a pragmatic guide to keeping the crew from each other's throats. Remember, a happy crew is a productive crew. The code outlined everything from loot division, usually a fair split with extra shares for those who took the most risks, to conflict resolution. Disputes were settled with a duel on deck, or more likely, a heated game of cards. And here's a nugget for you. Some ships even had a form of workers' compensation before it was cool. Lose a limb in battle. The code might guarantee you a payout, ensuring you wouldn't be tossed overboard as dead weight. A fair exchange, considering the occupational hazards of piracy, included everything from sword fights to scurvy. As night falls and the stars become your only map, the ship's deck transforms into a stage for stories, songs, and the occasional brawl. Pirates were, after all, human. They sang shanties that echoed with longing and laughter, tales of loves lost and battles won. They gambled with dice or bones, though debts weren't taken lightly. The pirate code had a word or two about that. Pay up or risk a fate worse than walking the plank, public humiliation. And let's not forget the rum. Ah, the lifeblood of the sea rat. The evening grog ration was more than just a drink. It was a ritual that bonded the crew. In a world where trust was as scarce as fresh water, those shared moments over a mug of grog were the glue holding the ship together. It wasn't just about numbing the senses after a hard day. It was about camaraderie, the kind that made you willing to risk your neck for the guy next to you when the cannons roared. So, as the ship rocks gently under a blanket of stars, take a moment to appreciate this band of brothers and sisters, united not by blood, but by the bonds forged in the crucible of survival. They might not have been saints, but they were a family of sorts, bound by a code that, for all its rough edges, offered a kind of order amid the chaos of the high seas. In the end, the pirate life was as much about community as it was about conquest. It was a paradoxical blend of freedom and rules, chaos and camaraderie. And as you settled down for the night, the ship's gentle sway lulling you into a half-dream of adventure and danger, you realized that, for all its perils, there was something undeniably alluring about this life. A life that, despite its brevity and brutality, promised a kind of freedom that was hard to find in the world left behind on shore. As the first mate calls for lights out, and the crew drifts into sleep, dreams filled with visions of gold and glory, you find yourself wondering what tomorrow will bring. Will it be triumph or tragedy? In the world of piracy, one never knew. But that was part of the allure, wasn't it? The chance to rewrite your story, one heave of the sails at a time. As you drift off to sleep under a canopy of celestial wonder, another thought stirs, a nagging reminder of the world you've left behind. The life of a pirate, daring and dangerous as it is, exists in a peculiar political no-man's land crafted by the very nations that now hunt you. Ah, the irony. Before you were a pirate, maybe you were a privateer, a sort of government-endorsed pirate with a license to pillage. Yes, you heard that right. A letter of marque was your golden ticket to loot, courtesy of the crown. Think of it as a hall pass for havoc. Privateering was piracy with a PR makeover. During wartime, nations like England, Spain, and France realized that it was much cheaper to outsource naval warfare to opportunistic sailors than to maintain a massive fleet. Why spend fortunes on your own ships when you can hire someone else to plunder your enemies for a fraction of the cost? And so, these paper-thin legal distinctions turned pirates into national heroes, until peace broke out and yesterday's hero became today's wanted criminal. It's like being asked to leave the party just as you're getting started. Take Sir Francis Drake, for instance. The English lauded him as a naval commander extraordinaire, but to the Spanish, he was El Drac, the dragon. His exploits filled English coffers with Spanish gold and silver in the late 16th century, and his knighthood was essentially a thank-you note from Queen Elizabeth I. Yet, if you'd asked the Spanish, he was nothing more than a glorified thief with a fancy title. Drake's story is a prime example of how one man's pirate is another man's patriot. Now, let's talk economics, the lifeblood of any good pirate tale. In the 17th and 18th centuries, maritime trade was booming. The triangular trade routes connecting Europe, Africa, and the Americas were the highways of their day, with ships carrying everything from sugar to slaves, spices to silver. But these routes were also the Achilles heel of global commerce. Pirates understood this all too well. A single successful raid could yield enough loot to retire on, assuming you survived long enough to enjoy it. The impact of piracy on global trade was a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it forced nations to beef up their naval defenses, leading to technological advancements and the growth of powerful naval fleets. On the other hand, it created an undercurrent of fear and instability that made maritime insurance as indispensable as the cargo itself. The cost of protecting ships often made the difference between profit and bankruptcy for trading companies. In 1718, the British government spent over £100,000 hunting pirates in the Caribbean, a sum that could have funded several small wars. And let's not forget the infamous pirate havens, Nassau, Tortuga, and Port Royal, home bases where pirates could rest, resupply, and spend their ill-gotten gains. These were the Las Vegas of the high seas, where the line between pirate and privateer was as blurred as the vision of a rum-soaked sailor. These enclaves of lawlessness were a thorn in the side of colonial powers, yet they were tolerated for their economic contribution to the local economies. Pirates spent their treasure with reckless abandon, keeping taverns, brothels, and trading posts in business. It was capitalism at its most chaotic. Yet, as governments cracked down on piracy, the noose tightened around these outlaw outposts. Colonial powers, realizing that piracy was bad for business, began to eradicate the very pirate networks they once tacitly supported. By the early 18th century, many pirates found themselves without a port in the storm, their former havens now hotbeds of law enforcement activity. The era of the pirate was waning, but not before leaving an indelible mark on history. The romantic notion of the swashbuckling pirate, free as the wind and beholden to no one, is tempered by these stark realities. You might have been a hero in one port and a villain in another, a celebrated privateer one day, a hunted pirate the next. Pirates weren't just rebels with a cause, they were pawns in a larger geopolitical game. As colonial powers played their hands, pirates found themselves caught between the tides of fortune and folly. As you lay there, contemplating the vagaries of fate that have led you to this life, you can't help but marvel at the audacity of it all. The world you navigate is one of constant flux, where today's ally is tomorrow's adversary, and where the price of freedom is eternally steep. You've chosen a path where the only certainty is uncertainty itself. And yet, there's something intoxicating about living on the edge, where every decision could be your last, but every sunrise offers a new chance at glory. So as the ship rocks gently, and the first mate's call for sleep lingers in the night air, you close your eyes, dreaming not of parrot-laden shoulders and buried treasure maps, but of the open sea and the freedom it promises. Freedom that, for now, remains just within your grasp. Tomorrow's horizon is an uncharted adventure waiting to unfold, and in this world of high stakes and higher seas, it's anyone's guess where the next wave will take you. As dawn breaks, and the horizon begins to glow with the promise of a new day, the world of piracy is entering its own twilight. The early 18th century saw the beginning of the end for the golden age of piracy, as the pirates' once unstoppable force met the immovable object of government resolve. Nations, tired of the constant pillaging, realized that allowing these sea bandits to roam unchecked wasn't just bad for business, it was a threat to their very power. And when empires start feeling threatened, they tend to get serious. Picture this. The year is 1750, and the War of Spanish Succession has just ended. The seas, once a chaotic battleground for privateers, suddenly find themselves eerily quiet. Pirates who had previously thrived under the guise of wartime necessity now found their services no longer required. Governments weren't just turning off the tap, they were actively hunting down their former assets. Britain, in particular, launched a maritime crackdown that would make even the most hardened pirate shiver in his sea boots. They poured resources into building the Royal Navy into an unstoppable force, spending an eye-watering £2 million annually by 1720, a sum that would have bought enough hardtack to build a biscuit castle. The legal noose tightened as well. Governments passed harsh anti-piracy laws, making it clear that the days of swashbuckling impunity were over. Suddenly, it wasn't just the Spanish who saw you as a villain, it was the whole world. The British Admiralty courts took on the brisk business of pirate prosecution, with trials often little more than formalities leading to a one-way trip to the gallows. Between 1716 and 1726, over 400 pirates were hanged in the Caribbean alone. Talk about a career hazard. And then there was Blackbeard, the rock star of the pirate world, whose very name could send chills down the spine of even the most seasoned sailor. Edward Teach, as his mother likely called him, was the embodiment of pirate folklore, fearsome, flamboyant, and downright terrifying. His infamous blockade of Charleston in 1718 was a masterclass in psychological warfare. and his penchant for weaving slow-burning fuses into his beard to create a smoky, demonic visage was pure theatrical genius. But even Blackbeard couldn't escape the long arm of the law forever. The end came swiftly for Teach, courtesy of Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy. In a fierce battle off Ocracoke Island, Blackbeard was outnumbered and outgunned, but not before he hacked through a dozen opponents, sustaining 20 sword wounds and 5 musket shots before finally falling. His severed head was hung from Maynard's bowsprit as a grim warning to all who dared defy the crown. If Blackbeard's death was meant to deter piracy, it may have succeeded, but it also cemented his legend. In a world where stories outlive men, Blackbeards became the stuff of myth. Despite the crackdown, the allure of piracy didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger as tales of daring and defiance reached the ears of those yearning for freedom and adventure. Hollywood would later take these stories and polish them into myths, creating a pantheon of rogues and rebels who swung from ropes with panache and charm. The gritty reality of lice-infested bunkmates and the constant threat of execution faded into the background, replaced by images of treasure maps and buried gold. Ah, the irony! Pirates, once feared and despised, became symbols of freedom and rebellion, the ultimate middle finger to authority. But why does the legend persist? Perhaps it's because pirates represent something we all secretly desire: the freedom to live by our own rules, the audacity to carve out a life on our terms. In a world governed by laws and limits, the idea of a life unchained, where the horizon is the only boundary, is intoxicating. It's a romantic notion, to be sure, but one that glosses over the harsh realities of pirate life. The truth is, most pirates lived short, brutal lives, always one step away from disaster. Their freedom came at a steep price, paid in blood, sweat, and the constant fear of betrayal. So, as we wrap up our voyage through the high seas, let's raise a metaphorical mug of grog to the real pirates, the men and women who braved the endless blue in search of fortune and freedom. They were far from the dashing heroes of fiction, yet they left an indelible mark on history, challenging the status quo and redefining what it meant to be an outlaw. Their legacy is a testament to the enduring human spirit, the ceaseless quest for autonomy and adventure that drives us to explore the unknown. In the end, the tale of piracy is a story of contrasts, freedom and lawlessness, legend and reality. It's a reminder that history is rarely black and white, but painted in shades of grey, with heroes and villains often occupying the same space, depending on who's telling the tale. So, next time you hear the call of the sea or see the Jolly Raja fluttering in the breeze, remember the real stories behind the legends. The truth may be grittier, but it's every bit as compelling. And as the waves crash against the shore, whispering secrets of the past, we're reminded that the spirit of piracy, like the sea itself, will never fully be tamed.